All right, everybody, I'm working as hard as I can to get things up and going. I am going to attach a new microphone. My other one was giving me some problems. I apologize. I will get a new microphone set up right now. Can everybody hear me? All right. Welcome back, everybody, to TikTok Town Hall. Tonight we are live with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I am thrilled to be joined by some amazing creators that you guys have recommended. I'm going to need some mods, so if you guys are my regulars, you know I would love for you to step up into the comments and volunteer. We do have about 30 assigned mods for tonight, but we are expecting a very large turnout. And as a result, we're going to need all the help we can get. We do have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. joining us in approximately 1 hour. As always, we have a very large group of your favorite creators that you know and love joining us here in the studio. Tonight we'll be joined by Ian from Cancel This Clothing. I'm going to try to adjust my microphone, so I apologize, everybody. But I'm going to be joined by Ian from Cancel This Clothing. This is going to be the first time that we have Seven Kin Homestead and Farm Fresh 24/7 ATL, two homesteaders that are very, very big in the homesteading community here and were recommended by our followers. I'm super excited to have them joining us. Everybody's sort of starting to slide in, and that's exciting. For anyone who doesn't know how this works, what's about to happen is that 9 or 10 of your favorite creators are going to join the chat. Down here in the comments, you guys are going to be able to ask real-time questions. Our topic tonight is healing the chronic disease epidemic in America. We are joined by none other than independent presidential candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who will be joining us in approximately 1 hour after we get this party started and we find out what everyone in the comments wants to hear about. So if you have questions you want us to ask, well, we are here to hear them. We want to hear them from you, and we want you to be putting those questions into the comments as we go. I'm going to start bringing up some of our panelists tonight. I'll introduce them, and then they'll get a chance to introduce themselves to you. And we are going to be asking about a broad range of topics, everything from growing our own food to corporate capture of the FDA and other programs in the government that are manipulating our food supply, big pharma, big ag. We're going to be talking about big medicine in general. We do have Dr. Mark Hyman joining us as a panelist for the first time tonight. You guys probably know him. He's a multi-time New York Times bestselling author and has a very large following here on the app and on other social media. He's going to be stepping up, and I'm very, very excited for that. We want you guys to start off, and I'm never good about this, so I'm going to ask your grace. We're going to start off by asking you guys to tap the screen a whole bunch because we want to get into the algorithm. I'm told it takes about 10,000 likes in the first few minutes, and we're going to ask you guys to start sharing the live. I'm going to start bringing our panelists up, and we will have a rotation of panelists as we go. Several of them have already started requesting. I'm going to start off with Middle Road Sanity. Tony, hello, Tony. How are you tonight?
I'm very well, Tiffany. How about yourself?
I am doing great. We are going to keep pulling people up. And for those that are first-time joiners, welcome, welcome. For those of you that have been here before, welcome back. Welcome back. I do know that Ian is running just a few minutes late. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome, welcome. As our panelists are joining, we're going to get to the point where we get to do interviews and go around and everybody can introduce themselves. I am super excited tonight. We do have a few panelists that will be joining us late. James Lee will be joining us a little bit later. Dad Like Jason can only do for about 1 hour, so he'll be joining us in about 40 minutes, and he'll have one of the first questions from Mr. Kennedy tonight. Super excited. By the way, I have been told that he would prefer we call him Bobby. So as much as it will be difficult for all of us, he prefers to be called Bobby in these chats, and he's pretty relatable. I had a really, really hard time with it the first time I sat down and with him. He called me to ask me if I would come on his podcast, and I think I called him Mr. Bobby Kennedy, sir. And we got through it, and we worked it out. It was okay. I am going to connect. I'm going to connect a microphone, and I've never done that before. So if I have any problems, Tony's going to take over for me for a few minutes. Can you handle that for me, Tony, if something goes terribly awry here? Beautiful. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right, I'm going to set this up over here, and we're going to make sure it works. Everybody, I'm going to give a quick testing, and then we're going to go into introductions. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Sounds good.
Is it working? Got it. Beautiful. All right. I'm going to turn my volume up quite a bit. and then my hand will get out of the way. Can everybody hear me?
Absolutely.
Good.
Problem is I can't hear you, and that is not good. Why can't I hear you? It's a
Testing
problem.
1, 2, 3.
Are you on your laptop?
Again, Tony, I couldn't hear you.
You're on your laptop
Yeah, no, I'm on my.
or phone?
No, the laptop would not let me start the scheduled event because I didn't schedule it there.
Unplug the phone. Unplug the phone microphone.
I did.
Yeah.
Are we okay?
Yeah, it thinks it's a 2-in-1.
All right.
That's a thing for later.
All right, we'll work on that. All right, we have a couple more of our panelists joining right now. And here they come.
Just a quick question for you. Are you getting a lot of wind noise from my side?
Nope.
Okay, great.
You're good.
A quick question.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, if at any point I'm going to ask that all of our panelists, it's going to look a little funny for just a moment. I'm going to ask all of you to make sure that you swipe down and go into do not disturb mode. Really important for the live to work. So everybody go on ahead and do that. Beautiful.
Can I throw an error caution out there really quick, Tiffany? When you're using the mics, it usually catches feedback from somebody else on the receiving end. It might cause that.
I have abandoned the microphone. We'll work on it for next time. Okay. All right. So we have several of our guests just coming up right now. Here comes Tara Lynn and Ian.
How's my audio, guys? Do you hear a fan?
You sound great, Ian.
Cool.
I would like everybody to know that we are all very jealous of Tara Lynn, who is on her way to a Rolling Stones concert. Boo.
I'd love to be happy for them.
I'm afraid I cannot. I'm just bitter. We are way cooler than that anyway. You should stay. I'm just saying, you could stay. All right, we have here comes Matthew with My Health Forward. Now, we do have a very large group of panelists tonight. The next person we're waiting for is Dr. Mark Hyman, who will be joining us momentarily. Matthew, if you need me to send you over an invitation for your microphone or for your camera, let me know, and I can get that for you. But we're going to start off with introductions, everybody. We are almost a Peak Brady bunch here. So we're going to get started saying hello. My name is Tiffany. I am some random girl who started fighting private equity on the internet. Decided one day I was going to try to ask a presidential candidate about it, and they actually started saying yes. So we welcome you to the TikTok Town Hall. I'm going to ask everybody, since I am not great at this, but I'm going to try tonight, to please start liking the screen. And we're going to ask you guys to start sharing it with your friends, family, loved ones, and your 9,900 closest relatives that you would invite to somebody else's wedding, but probably don't want to pay for your own. Our comment is on the chronic disease epidemic in America. We will be talking about a very large selection of topics, everything from the poison in our food and water supply to making a change and growing your own food and people purifying their own water or adding water purifiers to their homes. We're going to be talking about the accessibility of healthy food in food deserts and the accessibility of affordable, nutritious food. We have questions coming in about corporate capture and corruption in regulatory agencies and in our government and our legislative bodies. And we will be talking about whether or not there's any incentive to cure disease when it's so much more profitable to keep us needing medication for it.
Hey, Seven Can Homestead, mute your mic. We're getting a whole bunch of wind from Seven
Oh,
Can.
we are getting the wind.
I was wondering about that.
It's all right. We'll bounce back and forth. Keep your camera, though. Absolutely keep the camera. You're just so handsome. All right, guys. So I am going to try to send an invite to Dr. Hyman. I don't know if he knows how to. Oh, he said he would be a few minutes late. That's right. Great. He told me he was going to message me on my backup phone. For any of you that have the bat phone, it's right here in case anybody needs to get me a message. All right. And we've already got him coming in. Beautiful. All right. Mr. Kennedy's assistant says he is right on time tonight, so all is well. We're going to start by introducing our panelists tonight and them telling us why they want to be here. We're going to go to my right to see Tony from Middle Road Sanity. Go for it.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be in these here Brady Bunch windows with you all, and to everybody in the chat, thank you for being here. I'm excited to be here because we're seeing a huge overlap in complaints between left and right, and I, as a person who's felt very much in the middle politically my whole life, I'm salivating at the mouth at the opportunity to get us to realize that if we work together at a community level, we can really start to affect meaningful change, and that can resonate all the way up to the state and the halls of Congress as well, if we're loud enough. And that's why I'm here.
Right, and we're going to cruise over to Farm Fresh 24/7 ATL. What would you like for us to call you tonight, sir?
Nature Boy is the common known brevity for a player, so Nature Boy is fine.
Should I have Bobby call you that too?
Or Farm Fresh. Farm Fresh is easier. Let's just stick with Farm Fresh. Let's just stick Farm Fresh. That's good. So yeah, I appreciate being here. I appreciate sharing space with so many wonderful panelists and a community of people who are looking for change. Transparently, I was surprised to be invited because of my lack of stance on politics, but I realized that this was, as I backtracked and I visited or joined in on the last conversation, I realized that this is a real opportunity for a transition. This shift that we're looking for is really here. It's palpable. It's rested here, nested here on TikTok. And thank you, Tiffany, for putting this together. I'm inspired to jump back into the hope boat of politics again, because we are getting to have authentic dialogue and that transparent communication with our higher ups. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited to just see what comes of all of this.
All right, I'm going to go right below you to Ian.
Hey guys, my name is Ian of Cancel This Clothing Company. I'm a little sick today, so my voice is off. I'm going to be reasonably quiet except when I'm specifically talking. I'm psyched for this discussion because I feel like the health crisis is the biggest crisis of all. It affects every single person, and politics intentionally ignores it because all the donors in every direction, in every side of politics, all make money off of us being sick. Whether it's because they're making us sick or because they're treating the illness or any of the other adjacent monetary incentives built into the system. Like, no one wants to pay politicians to deal with the sickness problem. And so I'm just psyched that Kennedy is willing to use his platform to talk about it. And I want to use that pressure to pressure everyone else to talk about it more, because it's the #1 issue in America as far as I'm concerned.
All right, and to his right, we have Purple USA. Bree. Is it okay if we call you Bree?
Bree is perfectly fine. I do apologize for disappearing there. I choked on my spit right before I introduced myself.
Better now than in an hour. Just
yeah, you know what? It's for the best. Yes, thank you so much for having me here. I am a person who built a platform because I was angry about America, and I started finding myself a little bit hopeless. And then I started following some people and started talking to some people on the ground out here in the world. I'm in Arizona, which is a very purple state. And it just became clear to me that the only mission forward is unifying. And I'm very much with Cancel This Clothing Company. I do think that what we have in our food and the health of this nation is directly related to the state of politics today. So I'm really glad I'm here, and thanks for having me. Yeah.
We're going to move right next door to 7 Kin Homestead. Please unmute, please. And just so you know, if you're just muted, there's a microphone at the bottom of your screen you can tap. You don't have to go in and out like that.
Yeah, I'm just seeing that. Awesome. This is my first one of these, actually. So I'm going to gaff all evening, I'm sure. So I'm Jason from 7. Yeah. So I'm Jason from 7 Kin Homestead. I'm also, like I think a number of the folks on this panel, sort of famously non-political. I have some pretty deep thoughts about how non-political I am. And so essentially about 12 years ago, I got so fed up with the way things were, I took my family and I moved off into the middle of the woods. And now I spend most of my time teaching other people how to do the same, because I wholeheartedly believe that the most effective form of protest is to opt out of a system that you were not intended to win in. And so this ought to be a really interesting conversation for me, because this isn't a conversation that I get to have very often. So I appreciate you having me.
We are thrilled to have you here. And, you know, if you're going to come out with your first live, you should come out with a bang, right? This is perfect. We're going to go down to see Tara Lynn, who I know is only with us for a little bit tonight, but we are thrilled she is here. Hello, Tara Lynn.
Hello. I just love all of these faces. For those of you that don't know me, I am a property rights advocate. It's how I got my following on TikTok. The government tried to take my property in order to extend a public park. We fought really, really hard, and we got voices from all over the world to do what I call banging the drum, which is getting really loud and using our voices instead of our money to push back. And something that I think very few people know about me is that for the past 23 years, I have been a leader in the healthcare industry on the corporate side. So when it comes to healthcare, Ian, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more. I think this is the number one issue in the country, and it's something that I have been deeply ingrained in, again, for the past 2 decades. So I am so thrilled to be on this panel and be able to ask Mr. Kennedy some tough questions about the industry. So thank you for the opportunity, and hi to everyone here.
Right, and then we're going to come next door to Matthew from My Health Forward, which is one of my favorite and most reposted accounts on this app. He has done an amazing job building not just a trove of information for us, but building a website that also includes a database where you can find farms to buy your food from instead of these big corporations. Matthew, please tell us about yourself and why you're here.
Yes, thank you for the introduction, Tiffany. First off, I'm very grateful and honored to be invited to speak here. I've seen a lot of your videos, the other creators here, and really enjoyed it. So it'll be fun to get to know you a little bit, and then, obviously ask some questions to Bobby, because he's somebody that, a lot of us in recent years might have read his books or becoming more familiar. So it's exciting that, he's joining the platform to really talk with us, since a lot of us are recognizing, how much control corporations have over every aspect of our life. And like Ian, first and foremost, I'm most interested in health and spreading access to local food. So as Tiffany said, on my website, the biggest resource I have is just a farm map with over 5,000 local farms and ranches. And that's what I'm most passionate about, is just helping people connect with food, connect with local food sources and farmers.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, guys. So as always, we're going to start off the conversation by just talking a little bit about a few issues. We're going to throw out some big topics and see who has experience in those areas, what we want to drive the comments. We're going to pay attention to the comments down here. So if you have questions you want us to address, we're going to be looking for those right now. The comments are likely to start flying here as we ramp up towards the next 40 minutes. So we're going to do our best to catch them. I'm going to ask for a few ground rules down in the comments, and my moderators generally know these rules. We are 100% free speech advocates in this room, okay? We believe that free speech is free speech. However, if you spam the comments so nobody else can speak, you will be muted. Okay? If you want to say something, say it, but don't say it 600 times in 30 seconds and just cut and paste it. You will be muted. If you are hateful or threatening, you will be muted or you will be booted. That's it. I don't believe in blocking people. Everyone in my comments have always been respectful, because everyone in my windows knows that we are stronger when we're together and that we have way more in common than we have apart. This is not a left versus right window. This is an up versus down window. Okay? And none of us are up, I promise you. All right? There's nobody down here in this app that's in the top 1% of 1%. So we're all in this together, and I'm going to ask you guys to be respectful, learn from one another, absolutely engage in friendly discourse, in educational discourse, and learn to agree to disagree, because that's what it's going to take for any of us to work together to change anything. All right, we're going to get started. I want to kind of kick it off by just asking everybody how they feel generally about the food supply, and what has driven them to make some decisions for themselves, their kids, or their family. I'd really love to start with Farm Fresh or with Jason, because I just kind of want to feel, because you guys are literally in the ground, not on the ground, and I want to hear all about it.
Absolutely. So my journey really came out of necessity. Just realizing and taking into account the food system and what it was, and really being honest about it for myself and my family. I really started this journey out of pure necessity, no background, no family history of it. I started out the mud, and it was back in 2010. And it really just sparked a more encouragement to kind of venture out and continue the mission of learning how to grow food. We got our farm in 2017. and really found out really quickly how to quantify the data in Metro Atlanta we can possibly feed our community. So we reached in and kind of dug around the bag and pulled out this answer of, okay, if the adage is teach a man to fish and you can feed him for a lifetime, or you can feed yourself for a lifetime. So we took that adage and mixed it into our farm. So instead of providing produce for sale, we provide education. And then we went even further with the educational model, with now kind of empowering our community to become growers, bakers, and makers in some capacity, so that we can rely on them. Because again, when we quantified that data, we realized really quickly that, okay, 3 acres, you can only feed so many people. And I think once we kind of got that information, again, we empowered our community, and then we created an app called Farm Fresh 24/7, free to download on Apple and Google stores. And this initiative was really just based on me saying, hey, if we can just get everybody in one place, we can start to have a procurement map hyper locally within a 50-mile radius, and we can stop being so stressed with trying to grow, bake, and make everything. And that's basically the framework for where we are, or how we are where we are. It was based off necessity, and then again making those constant pivots and understanding that collectively we can sustain one another by relying on one another. So that's it in a nutshell.
Jason, is that similar for you?
Yeah, it's almost the exact same story. We had no experience at all. I mean, I could hardly start a campfire when we moved out here. It turns out having a background in marketing does almost nothing for you when you move to an off-grid homestead. Who'd have thunk it? And one of the things that we looked at was how fragile the food supply is, and the risk to benefit ratio for farmers in general makes the food supply extremely fragile. And on top of that, I started to look at throughout history how food supplies have been used to control people, and I decided that just wasn't for us. And so now we got a big old garden and a greenhouse, and we have chickens and ducks and geese, and we grow a whole bunch of our own food, and the amount of independence that makes me feel, whether it's real or not, I feel like I could actually take care of my family regardless of what happens with the food supply. Taken on top of that, we're the most overfed and undernourished nation on the planet. There is no shortage of food. If you spell the word FUD, right? There is a complete shortage of FOOD food. And if you can grow some yourself and kind of relieve some of the pressure on that supply chain, but also increase your own independence, I think there just can't possibly be anything wrong with that. And that's my thoughts.
We're getting a ton, and I mean a ton of comments on what's happening right now in Idaho with potato farmers.
Yeah, so I actually have some.
Oh, please go ahead, Jason.
So there's two sides to that particular argument. One, I don't think that there should be. What's actually causing this is an issue with junior and senior water rights, and what's happening is that the farmers who are afflicted by the curtailment have junior water rights. Now, who in this flow has the senior water rights is kind of ridiculous, because they were only able to acquire that because they got funneled a whole bunch of defense money to be able to have that, which is pretty strange. But in the state, the law, kind of lays out who gets shut off in times of drought, and the people with the junior rights do. Now, do I think that food, especially being a 250-pound, 6'3" potato-shaped Irishman, do I think the potatoes should suffer? No, I do not think the potatoes should suffer. I think that's going to change my life in a negative way, and I don't like that. But that is how that law works. Now, apparently yesterday they reached an agreement that would that would actually turn the water back on for about 330,000 of the 500,000 acres that are being curtailed. But still, there should be a separation between industry water and farming water, because we could probably go without lithium cobalt batteries for a while. We really can't go without calories for more than about 30 days.
Yeah, it's,
So,
it's really interesting too, because when you look at the way that governments are setting up these favorable subsidies and programs and tax breaks for these big corporations, mining operations, Amazon warehouses that come to a community, they never give as much for farmers. Never, right?
never.
They give hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks for a pharmaceutical research facility to come, right?
Yeah, right.
But they have no problem shutting off the water on the farmers and giving that same water to a cobalt mine, because they set up some kind of a deal, or a lobbyist made just the right donation at just the right time. And
Right.
I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but we watch it happen a lot on this channel, an awful lot.
Exactly.
That was the cutest gift we've seen today. Whoever did it, thank you. It was hysterical.
I think that was the off-grid guru.
It was
He's a
amazing.
buddy.
We're also getting a bunch of comments in here about Farmer Amos, Amish farmer in Pennsylvania that won his case against the FBI, seizing his crops, his harvest, his property, and he won on appeal this week in Pennsylvania. So another victory for farmers trying to live off grid and trying to produce food and not just go through the standard channels that they really seem to want us to stay in. Does anyone in here have more insight into that? Because I haven't gotten to read that ruling yet.
Yeah, that's all I know about it.
Okay, well, we do know that he won and he's getting all his crop, but it's too late for the harvest that they seized, right? He's not going to be able to resuscitate the products that were destroyed, which is shameful.
I think that that's a part of our standpoint is, with collectively sustainable in the model, we're reaching more than farmers. And as a farmer myself, I found the statistic staggering to know that it was 2%. I think I knew it, but I didn't see it on paper. 2% of Americans are feeding 98%. And I believe that's also just a setup for failure, because they can get targeted at any given time with curtailments and things of that matter. And now we're suffering as a whole. In our stance with Farm First 24/7 and the hyperlocal food system movement is that we need to start being prosumers, start to be producers as well as consumers, so that we all have a buy-in to the model of the food system, so that we also have some skin in the game. So whether you are somebody who is making toothpaste or hygiene items, or learning to bake bread, or growing your food, or saving seeds, like we're saying that everyone has a part to play within the system, so we can decentralize it and thus neutralize those effects from big ag, big corp, and any entity that wants to come in and kind of throw us off track. So I think that's one of the things that add into the pocket. Like everyone, especially on this chat right now, like everyone needs to be a part of their food system in a hyperlocal sense. And I think that's going to really put us where we need to be.
And
Ferris Fire has a great idea on here and is saying, I will sow for you for bread for me. Like, bartering systems are amazing. I barter for everything I can barter for. I'm constantly telling people, I'm married to a lawyer and I pimp him out. You want him? He's all yours. I just need, X or Y. He's all yours. I'll pay that bill. I got that. And I feed him well. He's fine. He's fine. We are going to pivot to a really important topic we're going to be talking about a lot tonight. We're going to be talking about the chronic disease epidemic, and there's going to be a particular focus tonight, specifically on the diabetes epidemic and the obesity epidemic, because these were not issues we faced as Americans in the broad way that we do, and not with juvenile diabetes or adult late onset diabetes. And now they have reclassified dementia as type 3 diabetes, or a diabetes that breaches the blood-brain barrier. This is a problem, right? And one of the things that I was reading about today and doing a bunch of research and all week long is that the FDA works together with a couple of food programs to create these pyramids, and the My Plate program that say what we should be eating and making government suggested food recommendations. And there's a whole bunch of corporations involved in that process that are constantly bidding or complaining or appealing to make sure that nothing changes too much and it all stays very cushy for whatever their lobby happens to be, whether it's the dairy lobby or the sugar lobby or the junk food lobby or the oils and fats lobbies, right? One of the things I recently found out is that Coca-Cola and other soda companies and candy companies have been making donations to the American Diabetes Association and the American Heart Association, large millions of dollar donations to get them to withdraw their opposition to maintaining inclusion. And during those negotiations, they're also guaranteeing that they don't oppose keeping soda machines and candy vending machines in hospitals and medical facilities. What the hell? Are you kidding me? And then I just sat there and thought to myself, well, if we cured diabetes, what purpose would there be for that association? Do they want us to get a cure? I mean, I hope they want us to get a cure, but why are they accepting donations? Why is the Diabetes Association accepting donations from Coca-Cola? Why? Why would they take that dirty, filthy blood money that is literally like killing and hospitalizing millions of Americans, right? And so I want to know, like, do you guys think, what do you think has to do with it? What do you want to learn about tonight? I believe Dr. Mark Hyman should be here in just a couple minutes, and we're going to get to ask somebody that actually specializes in these areas, right? But when I read that, I just kind of sat there and I said, of course I'm not shocked, because nothing shocks me anymore, truly. But
It's
why?
important to consider too that it's not just our health, although our health is obviously the first casualty, but the
Right.
budget that goes into curing America is bigger than the defense budget. Like the health budget to essentially subsidize the medical, the pharma industries, like to pay their bills so they can make better profits, all these corporations, that's the biggest taxpayer dollar suck in the entire budget. And so we are essentially paying taxes to the medical industrial complex to not cure our diseases that their buddies are giving to us. And all the things that could be done for education, for veterans, for like whatever it is, the cause that you care about, all the things that could be done for our planet and our people with all that money, it is mind-blowing.
Terilyn, I'm going to drop you down for a few minutes because I have to get Mark up in here to introduce him, okay? I know you're really busy, so I'm going to drop you down, but I'll pull you back up. Thanks, sweetie.
And to continue a bit what Ian was saying. So I'd done a podcast and a bunch of videos on Kellogg's in specific with what you were talking about, Tiffany, and how there's a new FDA rule about healthy food labeling that they've secretly been fighting with the cereal industry. And then with the upcoming 2025 USDA dietary guidelines, they're also working to try to shift that. And it just highlights how much trust and faith Americans have in our medical system and in health recommendations by these medical institutions. Because to me, a lot of it really comes down to the bottom line. Companies just want to sell more of their ultra-processed food products. And they know an easy avenue to do that is by getting these recommendations and by shaping these health guidelines. And we've already seen in Mexico when AMLO introduced new food labeling laws there, Kellogg's, Coca-Cola, all these companies worked to circumvent the system, started filing legal challenges known as amparos. And it was things as simple as they wanted to remove mascots off of sugary cereals. And then they found ways of then putting different sweeteners in or then putting the mascots under clear labeling. And so it just highlights how far these companies will go really just to sell more of their product.
I think it really hits home when you look at, there's a documentary called Plant Pure Nation. And this is just, I'm just a person who just enjoyed learning about it until I realized it was bigger than the food systems. It's all the systems. But I went down a rabbit hole of watching nature or health documentaries, Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, Fed Up, What the Health. But Plant Pure Nation was a documentary where some legislation they were really working hard to introduce it, just to say, eat more vegetables, maybe try a whole foods plant-based diet, not because it's better, just because it's really, really good for you. And the lobbies just broke it down. Try a whole foods plant-based diet, really good for you. And the lobbies just.
Don't worry, you guys don't have to stop. Dr. Hyman's still, oh, there he is. Everybody, we are being joined by Dr. Mark Hyman. I think he tuned in just a few minutes before. If you missed what we started our conversation with, do you want to be called Mark or Dr. Hyman or Dr. Mark? Oh, I think we got to unmute you. All right, I sent you an invite to unmute yourself. They're also going to see a microphone at the bottom of your screen that you can tap. It'll be right at the very bottom. There's like a little microphone shaped thing and you can just tap it. There it is. Perfect. All right, are you Dr. Mark, Dr. Hyman, or just Mark? Can we hear him?
No.
Can you guys hear him?
Sorry, we can't hear you.
The microphone looks like it's on, so.
Yeah, I think you just need to turn up the microphone or turn up your volume.
I have a good volume. I can hear everything.
That's weird. Okay, so we can kind of
hear
hear
you a
you now.
little
You're
bit
just very
now.
quiet.
You can't hear me?
We can hear you. It's just a little quiet.
It's on.
Are you on a cell phone?
Yeah, I'm on my cell
Oh,
phone.
that's a little better. Whatever you're doing, keep it that close. That's great.
Do
All right.
anything.
There we go. All right. So what we're talking about is we were just discussing very briefly that we were doing some research and we saw that the brands like Coca-Cola are making donations. Very briefly. We were doing some research. Oh, wait. We're going to get that. Doing some research and we saw that the brands like Coca. Any suggestions, guys?
Yeah. I how does that work? Is that better?
That's much better. Whatever
Okay.
you just did is great.
Okay, great.
All
Yeah,
right. So,
I for sure. It's very concerning. I heard what you guys were talking about. I was trying to sign on, and I think that, I wrote a book called Food Fix: How to Save Our Health, Our Economies, Our Communities, and Our Planet One Bite at a Time, that lays out from end to end how our food system is making America sick, is crippling our economy, is driving social injustice, racism, climate change, environmental degradation, disrupting our social systems, creating a mental health crisis, threatening our national security, and threatening our children's academic performance and future health. And it's not an accident. There's a very deliberate, strategic effort on the part of the food industry as a whole. And when I say the food industry, I mean big ag, big food. And big ag is the seed, chemical, and fertilizer companies. And farm is not too far off on the side of this either. From the food perspective, I heard you're talking about the American Diabetes Association being funded by Coca-Cola. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And the way in which the food industry subverts our health is very deliberate and very strategic. They fund research. 12 times the number of dollars go to research from the food industry, about $12 billion versus privately funded or government funding, so 12 versus 1 billion. And the research is always corrupt. For example, studies from the American Beverage Association show that drinking diet soda is fine for your health. Would you believe a study funded by the American Beverage Association, also known as the American Soda Pop Association? They fund professional associations, the American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, Academy of Nutrition Dietetics, list goes on. Just the American Heart Association alone gets $192 million from food and pharma, which is completely corrupt. They also create front groups that sound good, like Crop Life or the American Council on Science and Health, which has promulgated all kinds of nonsense that smoking is good for you, trans fats are fine, pesticides we shouldn't worry about, and basically that it's completely corrupted science, and it can be very subtle. They also co-opt social impact groups like the NAACP and Hispanic Federation by funding those groups so they'll align with them. For example, they funded NAACP millions of dollars so they would not come out against soda taxes. Or there was a big, they fund the public institutions like the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is one of the top children's hospitals in the country. They were going to go along with an effort to put a soda tax in place, and they gave the hospital, Coca-Cola gave them $10 million, and that they withdrew their opposition to their support of the soda tax. I'm not saying what soda tax is good or bad. It's just how they're playing in the landscape. They also lobby more than any other industry. The food and ag industry lobby more than any other industry and drive and corrupt our policies. And just for example, one policy was GMO labeling, law. They spent $192 million to defeat that one labeling law that would label GMO foods, which are labeled in every country in the world except Syria and the United States, including Russia and China, which labeled them.
You know, it's not just food laws that they get involved in either. I was trying to pass a law in Arkansas and Arizona to protect small businesses.
Yeah.
And when the International Franchise Association, which is tons of restaurants, right? They have tons of power because they're funded by billionaires. They called Tyson's and they called Yum Brands, that's Taco Bell and Pizza Hut and KFC. They called them and got them to go to Arkansas and threaten to pull their support from any candidate that backed the laws. Like they get approached from all sides and get involved in all kinds of politics.
And I detail this over and over again, example after example. So they corrupt our political institutions, they corrupt our social institutions, they corrupt our scientific institutions, they corrupt and create front groups that confuse and confound the public, and they corrupt our research institutions. And it's all very laid out in great detail. Everything's referenced. All the data's there. It's not put together coherently by anybody until I wrote this book. And I think I spent a lot of time in Washington trying to change those policies. There's over 200 food policies related to our food and health that are in 21 different agencies, most of which are at odds with each other and uncoordinated. In fact, I got the government through a friend of mine who's a congressman to do it's called the Government Accountability Office, which is the government watchdog over Congress. And they analyzed the impact of our food policies on health and the economy. And they found that they were completely undermining both our health and our economic health. And they said they were uncoordinated. For example, the U.S. dietary guidelines say we should reduce or limit our intake of sugar and processed foods. Yet SNAP, which is the biggest food program the country has of over $100 billion, 75% of it is junk food, 10% is soda. That's $10 billion a year. That's over 30 billion servings a year of soda.
You know, one of the first viral videos I had on this app was a viral video that I did on the fact that 69% of all of the food that is purchased in America is hyper palatable or ultra processed. And most people don't realize that just 30 years ago, that was it was less than 5% of food. But it was during the late 80s and mid 90s when Philip Morris and another tobacco company bought Kraft, Nabisco, and a host of other brands, that they had their scientists reformulate foods to make them addictive. And they found that if they created an unnatural formula of sugar plus fat plus salt, which is not something that really exists in nature, and made the food have all of those things and stripped out all the proteins and stripped out all of the enriched nutrition. And whenever you see something that says enriched, that means just they've added back in fake nutrition, right? And they've taken out all the real nutrition. That they had their scientists figure out how to make food more addictive. So you couldn't stop eating when you were full. And you would crave it when you didn't need it and your body didn't actually need those nutrients. And that was one of the first viral videos I had on this app, was the research I did on big tobacco conditioning all of us to be addicted to food, which is a direct contributor now. I also read a study just subsequent to that said when children are taught to be addicted to food when they're young, which is what they did by trying to formulate Lunchables, which was one of the first addictive foods targeting children, right? Jell-O. They were targeting children with pudding cups. They were adding salt and sugar and fat to all these foods. And when children are taught to be addicted to food as children, they're more likely to be addicted to cigarettes, which they knew when they would be older. Shrugs, we don't say that word, shrugs, we'll say shrugs. That they're more likely to be addicted to gambling and any other host of issues later in life. And so they wanted to get them young, and they've kept them all the way through. And it's leading to all kinds of epidemics in America. I don't know if everybody else agrees with that, but that was the research, and that was the first viral video I did on this app.
It's been a long time coming. I mean, I remember in '96, I live in Ohio, and I'm surrounded by farmland. I mean, miles upon miles upon miles of farmland that doesn't feed people. And that was normal for me. And the more I started looking into the food situation, what was in it, how much of it was actually nutritious for us, it's very, very frightening to see just how much of our space is being used for feed corn, ethanol, soy products, and things like that. It's really unsettling because we could be very easily feeding people. And not only that, but actively restoring the soil. There's a whole slew of problems because of industrial farming, which is really the catalyst for all of this stuff. Centralizing the power of the meat industry. everybody else hear that?
I did. That was a really strange sound. I don't know what that was. It sounded kind of like a washing machine. Guys, we are 12 minutes out from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. joining the live. And so I know a lot of you guys are probably wondering where he's at. He is going to be joining us for 90 minutes, starting in 12 minutes. We are going to ask you guys to give us a little kick in the algorithm. So if you guys can take a minute and do the tapping things, because I don't want to interrupt him by asking you to do that. And if you guys are waiting to share for him to be almost here, it is almost done. So if you guys can help me with those two things. Matthew, you have done, I don't want to say more research certainly than Dr. Mark or Dr. Hyman, we can clarify that. But you have certainly done an astronomical amount of research about the way that our food supply has not only been infiltrated, bastardized, but polluted. Like, how do you feel about what's happening when they grab them when they're kids and like keeping us all the way through adulthood? Like, is that intentional? What's your research showing?
So would you mind repeating the last part of the question, please?
I just want to know, like, has your research shown like any correlations between grabbing them when they're kids and how it translates into adulthood, or whether or not these food companies are targeting kids in the stuff that you post a lot about how our food supply has been infiltrated?
Yeah, so I mean, we can see drastically. It started pretty heavily with, my generation and maybe people a little bit older that were maybe raised on a lot of devices, TV, electronics, that then they started marketing heavily towards kids and understanding that when you get like the full lifetime value of the customer with a kid, it's the greatest is then you have them starting on, would it be cereals and kids, things marketed with different TV shows, cartoons, and so forth. They know how to grab their attentions. They put that on the shelf level that would, the kid would see. And then that never really stops. So the products that you're consuming may change as your age does, but your addiction and craving for whether it's highly refined carbohydrates, whether it's sugary drinks from, say then being high fructose corn syrup to diet is an endless cycle that continues. And we see a lot of this, food science or food innovation is just creating new ultra processed ingredients that then are approved through, the GRAS loophole. And there's entire teams at these companies dedicated solely to just inventing new additives and finding new ways to combine them to make the food as addicting as possible.
I guess I want to ask the obvious question, and we probably should ask when Bobby gets here. But Dr. Mark, Matthew, is there any benefit to any of these companies actually trying to cure anything, or are they just trying to keep us sick forever? Like, is there any financial incentive to cure anything, or maybe only things that are going to kill you in the short term, so you're not a forever customer? Do they just want to keep us well enough to keep spending money on medicine and sick enough to like keep giving them money for it? Like, I literally looked today for the last time we cured anything, and I saw a very amazing advancement in cystic fibrosis. I will give them all the credit in the world, but we haven't like really cured anything else. Maybe hepatitis, like in the late aughts, there were some big advancements, but what else have we actually done with all these advancements we've had technologically? Like, what's getting better?
And I think that there's kind of two sides to when we're talking about these food companies. Is one half is they just want to sell as much of their own product as possible, and then when you're within the industry, if you're more likely to say shop at buy food at McDonald's, then you're more likely to get Coke, and then you're more likely to get chips alongside it, whatever it might be. And then the other part of it is then the interrelation between the food companies and the pharmaceutical companies. So I think part of it is the pharmaceutical companies know that, as we've all been talking about, they can profit off of people when they're sick and when they have these chronic health conditions that start at a young age. And then on the flip side, the food companies know that they can get people to continue buying the foods, because when you eat highly processed foods, you're just going to continually crave more and more. You're going to gain weight, and you're going to need more calories.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dr. Mark, are we on the right track in this line of thinking? Like, are we, and what do we do about it? Aside from drawing attention like this, what do we actually do?
I think most doctors.
Oh, louder, bring it closer. I'm sorry. Your phone is so quiet when it's away.
You can't hear me?
There, yep.
Okay. I said, most doctors and scientists are good people who want to help their patients and advance science and do good things. I think the pharmaceutical industry is a little bit conflicted because they want to find drugs that are blockbuster drugs that people have to stay on for life and manage chronic disease rather than cure it. So I think they're not incentivized to actually do the right thing in many ways, based on how the system works. For the drugs that do cure things like hepatitis, they're extraordinarily expensive, right? So, or chemotherapy or cancer drugs that can sometimes be effective. It's a problem, and I think what they're recognizing is there's a limitation in these blockbuster drugs that are based on lifestyle diseases, and we should be really focusing how do we address the underlying lifestyle diseases rather than trying to just medicate them into submission, which doesn't really work. For example, diabetes is a completely curable disease through food, nutrition, and lifestyle, and yet we're seeing escalating drugs like Ozempic and insulin being expensive and pharmacological approaches that really don't address the problem. And I think I had dinner with a guy today who's a fairly educated guy who's got type 1 diabetes, and he's like, well, I just take more insulin to cover my carbohydrate intake. And I'm like, no. I said, how many insulin units should you take a day? He says 50. I'm like, well, that's not normal. You should be eating about 15 if you're metabolically healthy, which means you have double diabetes. And I think people understand that the pharma industry is often has sort of perverse incentives, and people in those companies think they're doing the right thing. But the only problem is that they don't realize how there is another way. Like functional medicine, what I do is really about getting to the root cause of disease and treating the root cause, not just medicating the symptoms. And yet most doctors don't know how to do that. They don't learn how to do the medical school. And so they're really not able to apply this model. But I've done this for decades and see that it can be profoundly effective. Someone put in type 1 diabetes into a lifestyle disease. That's true. It's an autoimmune disease. However, if you're type 1 diabetic and you need more than 20 units of insulin a day, you're also developing insulin resistance, which is type 2 diabetes. And there is a phenomenon called double diabetes, which is what often happens if you have type 1 and you're gaining weight and you're eating too much carbs and you're actually covering your carbohydrate with extra insulin. And I think, we need to kind of get real about the diseases that we can actually change the trajectory by aggressive lifestyle intervention and doing the right thing and having the right policies. America is in a terrible situation right now because we're the sickest population in the world. We are having a declining life expectancy and increasing healthcare expenditures. We have $1 to $5 of our economy is spent on healthcare. Outcomes are getting worse and worse. 80% of it's chronic illness. Most of it's preventable or reversible with lifestyle and other interventions that I do in functional medicine. And yet healthcare doesn't just, unfortunately, meet that need. And it's because the way our reimbursement is and what we pay for, both pharma and surgery. And it's not saying all surgery or pharma is bad. Thank God we have it. It's great when you need it. But for the conditions that we're treating, it's really not the right treatment. The right treatment for diabetes is for type 2 diabetes. I should be smart to it. It's not insulin. It's changing your lifestyle and your diet.
All right. I'm going to give everybody just a heads up. We're about 3 minutes out from Bobby joining us tonight. I know that's what a lot of you are here for. It's about that time. So if you guys can just keep us in the algorithm, that would be great. Last time he joined us, it got a little crazy really fast. And the comments got a little harder to maintain. So if any of my mods are down there, be ready. It's about to get a lot chaotic. What will happen as Bobby joins the live is that we will drop a couple of our panelists down, or everyone will drop down, possibly. We're going to see if he comes in comfortably. I'm going to rearrange this as a panel, which means I think the most we can have in at a time is it 6, Ian? Tony? Is it 6 once we're in panel mode? Tony, you're muted. 9 in panel mode? You sure? Okay, all right. So I'm going to bump us into panel mode, and then we'll be rotating people down and up that are already in the window. So don't go anywhere. If I drop you down, I'll give you a little heads up. I'll pop some people down, and then I'll bring us back on up when it's time for questions. And oh, I might be getting a message saying he's almost ready. Okay, so for anyone that's just joining us, we're going to give a quick recap. We are 1 hour into our panel on healing the chronic disease epidemic in America. Is it possible? What's causing it? What's contributing to it? We are about to be joined by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he's going to be joining whoever's typing mute, please. He's going to be joining us to discuss a laundry list of issues, right? There are so many factors at play. He was originally supposed to join us for an hour, but he has agreed to stay for an extra 30 minutes so we can cover as many of these topics as possible. And we're going to try to get answers. If you have questions about the chronic disease epidemic, about access to healthy food, that is our topic for the evening. Please be putting them in the comments. I'm trying as hard as I can to write down as many of them as I can. So if you see me frantically looking right and left, that is what I am doing. And I appreciate your patience with me. It is a good moment right now while he's joining us. If you guys are interested in continuing this conversation, to tap on the boxes and follow the creators here, because they work really, really hard to bring these panels together. And we are so, so grateful. We want them to keep coming back. And if you want to learn about food, homesteading, that's Farm Fresh and Sevenkin. If you want to learn about where you can buy food from farmers, that's Matthew, My Health Forward. He has an amazing database covering all 50 states where you can find farmers that you can buy from or get delivered from. There's 100 ways. Absolutely. If you want to watch people sing like Britney Spears, singing, what was it? Billie Eilish? Britney Spears versions of Billie Eilish songs, and talk about her amazing 2 children with autism, her family's long-term struggle with chronic disease, Lindsay Taylor. Purple USA is where we all come together to try and heal the divide in this country, along with Tony just above her. Ian is my resident conspiracy theorist who goes into all of the ways that our government has been captured and how all of the agencies collaborate, along with a bunch of other stuff. You guys probably already know him. And then we have Dr. Mark Hyman, who is an award-winning author that specializes in chronic disease and the way that food in America is making us sick. For me, I'm a girl that fights private equity, and they own everything. So I talk about a lot of stuff, right? And for some reason, presidential candidates keep coming to talk to me. I'm very grateful. I am going, oh, hold on. We just got a message. It looks like it's about that time. All right. He's here. He's ready to join. Bree, I'm going to drop you down temporarily because your questions are a little bit further down the list. I'm going to move all of us into preparation for bringing in Mr. Kennedy. I'm going to send his, oh, I've got to drop someone out before I can bring him in. 1 second. And without further ado, we're going to bring up Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It may take just a moment to get him in here, and I'm going to reorganize the windows as soon as he's in here to make him on the big screen. Everybody remember, stay polite, respectful, and open to other ideas in the chat. I love free speech. The only way you're going to get kicked out is if you are spamming the comments, being hateful, threatening, or like just hostile. We love agreeing to disagree. We love learning from each other. So just keep it polite and you can stay. I promise. We want you here. All right, let's see what's going on. What's going on? He is in the process of joining, I believe. Hold on. All right, Team Bobby, please push the little pink and blue people link. If Sue is there, I showed her how to do it today. Just push that little pink and blue link of the 2 people, and I will pull you up in because the link is not working for them.
If you guys are in the chat, be sure to tap the screen, add some hearts.
Thank
Share the
you.
space. It's about to go out to all of your algorithms. 1.2 thousand people are in here currently filtering through. Do all the things to get this out to everybody. The whole point of this is not to tell you to agree with Bobby on everything that he believes. The point of this is to have a conversation with politicians on a mainstream stage where they come directly to us in our platforms rather than moderated by mainstream media and mainstream questions that are filtered and screened before they talk about them. And so the more that you can spread this space and these conversations, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with everything in it, the more pressure that we can put on all the politicians to start coming to us where we are having conversations instead of hiding behind their little media panels on their little screens with all their big money that they like to, keep a safe environment so that they don't have to do anything difficult. So, do what you can to boost the space, do what you can to be respectful and, have cool conversations in the chat. Don't be afraid to disagree in the chat, just, be cool, be cool.
What is happening? Sorry, guys. I am working on getting them in here. It's not sending it through for some reason, so I'm just pivoting. Give me just a moment.
TikTok is a rough app. TikTok is, doing its best to be live, but it's hard to run a live app while you also can put cowboy hats on people and, send flamingos across the internet and whatever else is going on. Thanks, people for Kennedy. I appreciate the comments.
We actually just hosted Jill Stein, somebody asked in the comments, this past Sunday, and Chase Oliver, the Libertarian candidate, the Thursday before that.
And he's here, everybody. I'm going to tap on his screen and expand him somehow. And there he is. All right, I'm going to send through a video request. We're going to turn on your camera. Doesn't have access to join with video. What does that mean, guys?
That's right. His photo looks mighty handsome. Just young little Bobby.
But we definitely should be able to see his video. So I want to see what it looks like from his side.
The computer, maybe.
Yeah, if you guys weren't here for the last,
It's because you're not in the Kennedy. You guys don't have enough followers to join with video. You have to join from the account. You have to join from the official account, Team Bobby. I apologize.
Sorry.
I'm fancy knowing that you have another account, but you have to join from the Kennedy account. You don't have enough followers on this one. I'm going to drop you out, and I'm going to send you back to join from the actual Team Kennedy account.
how many followers does he need? Maybe we can get him enough followers right
Can we get him enough followers? Everybody go follow this account very quickly. We need about...
Yeah, that could make it a lot easier.
Is that like 1,000? Is that 10,000? What do we need for that? 1,000?
I think it's 1,000.
Actually, I think it's only 500.
16, guys. I need 700 of you to follow this account right now.
Yeah.
You guys handle that for me?
He might get better views on his other account too, though.
I agree.
So.
I think that we should be on the other account.
I'm
going to mute myself and help the team, guys. I'll be right back. Ian, will you take over for me, please?
Yeah, I got you. If you guys are new to this format, this is not the first time we've done this. Tiffany is an absolute machine. She's been working behind the scenes. She put the first one together with Bobby a couple of weeks ago, and the topic was about the TikTok ban, and so Bobby naturally came on for quite some time now and about free speech for, you know, a lot of his career. So he agreed to come and just talk about the TikTok ban, and it got so many views and was such an effective format. Then we started to think, what else can we do with this format? And Tiffany did the work behind the scenes to get, so far, Chase Oliver, the Libertarian candidate, and Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, and starting to get all of the different not alternative candidates onto this app to start having these discussions with us. And hopefully that'll lead to debates, and hopefully that'll lead to more candidates just coming straight into our rooms and talking to us. And in the very first one, it was kind of cool because Bobby was expecting to be like, you know, in a studio talking to us, but, you know, flights got delayed and things were crazy. And so Bobby was in his car, just using his phone, just hanging out with us while he was like driving through New York or something in the back of his car, just talking into his phone, which is, I mean, like, it would look weird on a CNN TV show, but it was so cool to just like how much better of a illustration of the access that the apps can give us directly into just, you know, unfiltered versions of politicians instead of the like made up, done up, paid for facade, really, that we're normally presented with. Tony, you've been along for the ride the whole time. What's your thoughts about how this started and where it's going?
I think it's going to facilitate a new way of communication. If we can't see our politicians in a very human way, in a very candid way, and we can't connect with some humanity in them, I don't think we're going to let them fly at some point. If this sort of thing catches on, that's the trend we start to create, where it's like, if I don't feel the human and you start to seem like some character, I don't know. It's too easy to get lost in what to believe about candidates once they're turned into a caricature of their campaign.
Is anyone else super excited we found his like personal account?
Yeah, I was
Found Bobby's alt, no longer anonymous.
No, he's not.
That was an instant follow.
I didn't see him in the request because it wasn't the campaign account, so I was like, that could be anybody. I'm a little excited. All right, they're logging into the campaign account. They'll be back in just a minute. I do want to just say there's a few things going on right now in the comments. One of the comments that has popped up at least 40 times that I've seen it, because I'm tallying what's really popular right now. People want to know why our Department of Defense is involved in feeding us school lunches. Has anyone seen that came out this week? not this week, it was about 2 weeks, there was a woman who handled all ordering for her school district that had a video go viral because her ordering slips were going to the Department of Defense. And somebody said, why? And she says, that's who handles all federal school lunches and all federal school lunch programs. We have to order all lunches through the Department of Defense. Why isn't it the Department of Agriculture if it's going to be a department, first of all? I mean, I have lots of thoughts on that because my husband somehow works for Commerce and the Department of Agriculture, even though he works at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. If you can riddle me how the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office falls under the Department of Agriculture, but school lunch does not, I don't understand. But if anyone has any insight on that, that is a very popular topic in the comments right now. And I would love any insight anyone has.
Yeah, I have a lot of insight. I think at some point in time, we got to call they say if it walked like a duck and it quacked like a duck, we got to call it a duck. And I think we need to just be honest. And I mean, we have a wealth of information at our fingertips. We have supercomputers. We're walking around. We can Googleize anything. I think the information is already at a tier where it's digestible and it's available for everyone. I think the most simple answer is, why do we allow it? Like, what's the thing that stops it, and why aren't we doing it? And again, I just think it really falls on our shoulders. I know I get a lot of crazy looks when I say it like this, but if we're not going to do it, if we're not going to start feeding ourselves, we're not going to deny ourselves the convenience of just ordering from these companies or going down the aisle and grabbing the food, because it's, you know what I mean? We already know it's full of all these things that are going to cause us a shorter lifespan, cause our children all kind of ailments and illnesses. We just have to be about the work. We have to make a stance and have some effort, commitment, and sacrifice involved so that we can kind of project ourselves forward. At this point, there's no questioning, man. The Scooby-Doo mystery is solved. The mask's been pulled off. We know what the issue is. We just got to make a stance as the people.
Nicole Vanelli in the comments section just had a fun point, which is something that was said in one of the reviews of that viral video. It's the same food as they use to serve prisons, and that's why they handle the ordering. It's the same food they use to feed prisons. It's the same suppliers, it's the same food products. And I'm not saying that prisoners should get worse food than school students. I'm saying they're all getting bad food, right? Like,
No way.
they're all getting bad food. That's what's happening right now.
So I think I'm not 100% clear, so I want to make sure we all look this up after. I believe the Department of Defense funding school lunches is only for schools within the Department of Defense education programs. So I'm not 100% sure, so I can't say for certain, but I believe that's only schools within, I guess you would say like the military industry. I don't think it's just all public schools. It still is, very concerning, but I believe the USDA school nutrition program covers the majority of just public schools in the country. But there are still big concerns. I just was talking about how since I think 2001 or 2, they offered to school districts irradiated ground beef. And then it's up to each district to decide whether or not they want to purchase that irradiated ground beef, but they're not required to disclose it. Which is a significant issue because there's far more we don't know than we do know about irradiating food, especially ground beef, because of the fatty acids in it and how it can create different radiolytic compounds. So I'm still not 100% sure, but I think it's good we all look into that a little bit further than just believe the one video, and not that it's not true, but it might have just been for that specific school.
That's why you follow my Health Forwards, folks, because he actually does the research and doesn't just produce clickbait. And he actually, especially on apps like TikTok, where they incentivize the quick clickbait, the instant headline. That is poison in general, but especially when you're talking about health and food content. Health is a complex system, right? Like, I'm sure that everyone can agree that our health systems in our body are not just, a singular system you can understand immediately. And so people that actually do the research, people that actually have expertise, people that actually, chase down the truth, can't recommend My Health Forwards enough.
Thank you. And I know
there's 2 memorandums of understanding I just found between the DOD and the USDA related to food ordering. So now I guess I'll send those over to you, Matthew, and we can kind of tear into those and see what's going on.
I would love to read into that further.
Yeah,
that would be great.
I just found 2 MOUs. Fascinating.
Yeah, and this is how, so much of this research starts. It's just everybody coming together, exchanging ideas, bringing something up. and then it's good on both sides to be, skeptical. And the one thing with that Ian brought up, and Mark would be interested to hear your thoughts on this is, when we're becoming a lot more aware about what we're putting into our bodies and what we're eating, it's also very easy to become really anxious and stressed out about it, which can also put a very big physical toll. And none of these creators are, guilty of it, but something that can happen on the internet is people can take advantage of that, and they can use stress and fear to get views and to motivate you to buy something. So Mark, I'm interested to know at your clinic, is that something you see often, patients coming in really stressed and anxious about food, which is good because then they're coming to you, but then also that could, create a very poor relationship.
I mean, I think people are confused more than stressed and anxious, and I do think some people have, overly, I would say, enthusiastic concerns about what they're eating, and get too rigid and strict. There's a whole term for this called orthorexia. I don't think that's that common, but I do think people are confused, and I think that it's important to empower people and educate people with the information so they can make a choice about what's going on with their bodies and what works and what doesn't. And so I find if you do that and treat people like they have some level of intelligence and capacity for agency, that they're going to make different choices. Say, okay, look, your blood sugar's high, it's probably not a good, or your triglycerides are high, it's probably not a good idea for you to eat as many refined carbohydrates and starches, and give them guidance about what to eat. Then people usually are very appreciative and will follow it and have significant improvement in their health.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I've noticed an uptick in the amount of and different diets work for different people, as you said, but of accounts or people promoting very extreme diets. And I don't know, Mark, is the approach at your clinic more of a just whole foods approach, and you should intuitively listen to your gut and what you're eating?
Yeah, I always say the smartest doctor in the room is your own body. Listen to what it's telling you. If you feel like crap when you're eating something, don't eat it. It makes you feel good, eat it. But I think it's really about.
I'm sorry, Mark. Go ahead. I apologize. I was going to say, Chief, in the comments, for everyone who wants access, just posted the links to the memorandums of understanding between the USDA and the DoD and the food ordering programs for the U.S. So anybody in the comments, it's not Matthew, that I can't send it to personally.
Okay.
I just posted them there. It's about 40 or maybe 100 comments up at this point, but they are there. There's a dragon emoji.
Yeah, I think somebody else said something about healthy foods. Geisha said something about healthy foods are expensive. People can't afford it.
They are.
I think that's a myth, and I think the food industry is very good at hijacking the narrative and saying it's expensive, it's difficult, it's time consuming, you can't do it. You deserve a break today, right? Leave the cooking to us. Betty Crocker was a fictional character that I thought was a real person. Her cookbook was in my mother's kitchen, and the food industry designed that cookbook to put processed food into the American kitchen. Add 1 can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup to your casserole. Add a roll of Ritz crackers to your broccoli, whatever, baked broccoli casserole. It was crap. And they've done this on purpose to make people think that they can't do it. And when I went down to South Carolina as part of a film I was in called Fed Up, I met with a family of 5. They lived in a trailer. They lived on food stamps and disability. Their father was 42, had already had a kidney failure on dialysis from diabetes at 42 years old, from type 2 diabetes. And they were desperate to get healthy. They were hundreds of pounds overweight as a family. The father was, very overweight. The mother was 100 plus overweight. The son was 16 years old and 50% body fat and over 100 pounds overweight. And I went in their kitchen, and rather than giving a lecture, I said, why don't we cook a meal together? And I used a guide called Good Food on a Tight Budget from the Environmental Working Group, which is how to eat food that's good for you, good for your wallet, and good for the planet. And they lived in one of the worst food deserts in America, in Easley, South Carolina. They were able to do this, and they were successful. They lost over a couple hundred pounds as a family the first year. The father lost 45, got a new kidney. The son lost 50, but gained it back, worked at Bojangles. But then ultimately he lost 132 pounds, was the first kid in his family to go to college. He asked me for a letter of recommendation for medical school, and I was a doctor. The mother lost over 100 pounds, and they did it simply by learning what to do and learning how to eat well for less. You don't have to buy a $70 grass-fed ribeye steak. You can eat cheaper cuts of meat, vegetables, fruit, nuts, seeds, whole grains, beans. It's not expensive. And I, like my family was poor when I was growing up. I remember my mom used to make borscht. She'd get the cheapest cut of meat from the butcher. She'd throw it in the soup with cabbage, onions, carrots, canned tomatoes, salt, pepper. She'd, throw some raisins there, make it kind of sweet. It was delicious. And it's like a Russian cabbage borscht, super nutritious, super dense, super cheap, carrots, onions, cabbage, not cheap, not expensive. So you can, and I think that I know I lived on $27,000 a year, and I had a family of four. And it was a while ago, but still, it's not that much money. And I was able to feed my family real whole food. I shopped at Costco. I bought in bulk. I made from scratch. And it's like we basically subverted the American kitchen. The food industry has done this on purpose, and it's really criminal. So we need to take back our kitchens, and we need to learn how to cook and how to take care of ourselves, and that's kind of the path forward.
There's been a recent debate here. Oh, I'm so sorry, Farm Fresh. Please go ahead.
I was just going to chime in. I think one of the most impactful things that we teach at our farm here south of Atlanta is educating our community on breaking out of the box and understanding agriculture in a more traditional method. So we teach indigenous gardening, and indigenous gardening relied a lot on the native species. So a lot of these medicines derive from native species, and we teach people like it's food out in your yard. Is clover and henbit and nettle, and we're programmed to feel like the weeds are bad and we're going to destroy the weeds, but these are actually edible things. And if you add them into your diet, and that's what we do as a homestead, we don't make a whole lot of money, but the proof is in the pudding. We're a family of six, and we live off of our land, and not that we're growing acres and acres and acres of corn and potatoes, but we're actually going out and identifying the things that are readily available that you don't have to fertilize, you don't have to water. They pop up time and time again. They condition the soil, they hold moisture, they affect the biome of the microorganisms, and then you consume what they pull up. And this is literally something that can impact everyone. Like tomorrow, you don't have to have a garden, you don't have to have green space, you just have to be able to use your eyes and your gut that they commonly refer to as your first brain, and it orients you to these things that are right outside your door and very much available.
For those of you asking in the comments, Mr. Kennedy is just switching to another account. He was kind enough to join us from his private account, which we didn't know existed, but he doesn't keep followers on there, and he didn't have enough followers to join us live. So they're switching to the campaign account right now. For those of us that were here when that happened, now we get to follow him on his private account.
I might add to this thing about the myth that like healthy food is expensive. I think that a lot of people get tricked into thinking that healthy food is expensive because healthy food that is cheap doesn't taste like processed food that tastes really good. And so you want to be able to like microwave something really easily and quick that's going to taste like a Lunchable or whatever it is. But like learning to cook healthy meals on a budget, at first your palate is going to reject it because you've been fed all this salty, fatty, sugary food. And so it's a process of training yourself to eat real food, which at first is a process of detoxing all of the addictive chemicals that are in the food you've been eating up until that point. But eating things like ground beef and vegetables and, like it's not expensive if you do it simply. It just doesn't taste the same as eating all the processed foods.
Which goes to the whole piece of education. So much of this is lost on so many people. I know so many people personally who feel proud of themselves when they get the frozen lasagna out of the oven. They feel like they've cooked something because they used the oven. And I feel like it's education and understanding gut health. I attended a seminar recently on gut health, and it's so deep it would take us like 3 more of these lives to talk about that. But when you try to research what gut health is, how do you know what you're reading and who's posted this information? And is it all the same stuff that you're going to buy from all the same suppliers? And it can be really intimidating. And I think it really begins with education. What is the right foods for most of us? How do we procure them for ourselves and our neighbors? And I don't really see a whole lot of other ways of getting around the situation we're in personally, which is why community to me is
I don't know about the taste thing. I think people do have their taste buds corrupted. But when I cooked this meal with this family in a trailer, we cooked turkey chili, we made fresh cornbread from scratch, salad from raw ingredients, olive oil, vinegar dressing, roasted sweet potatoes, and stir-fried asparagus. they loved it. They were like, "This is really good. I didn't know this would be so good." And even the kid who never ate a vegetable in his life, was eating it. He's like, "Are there vegetables?" And I'm like, "No, no vegetables." It is good.
Mark, how long ago was that?
It was 2014. It's called Fed Up. You can watch the movie.
2014.
Yeah.
That was when that meal was cooked. So I think there's an objective and a subjective reality issue here. I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate because I have 5 kids.
Everyone knows we're bringing him up. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I have 5 kids, and we grow a lot of our own food and raise chickens and everything else. It still costs me $1,000 a month to feed my family. And that's madness. And we do eat simply. We cook all of our meals at home. I think there's a significant difference economically between how much you could cook that meal for in 2014 and how much you could cook it for now in 2024. And so I don't know, it'd be interesting to actually look at those numbers.
And I think greedflation, we should say greedflation is contributing. I'm going to introduce, I was told to call him Bobby tonight. I still
Bobby.
I would say Mr. Kennedy, but everybody, please welcome Bobby Kennedy to the stage. We are so happy you are here. Thank you for joining us tonight. There are thousands of people that are thrilled you are joining us, and we have had tens of thousands of comments with questions. So we're so glad you're here. Welcome, welcome.
Tiffany, thanks so much for doing this. I'm sorry it took me so long to get on. I was actually listening on the audio for about 15 minutes from about 5:45, and I heard Mark Hyman talking, and I heard you talking, and a number of other people saying really important things. I wish I had been able to get on from the very beginning because this is such an important call, and I commend you, Tiffany, for setting it up. For the last 25 minutes, we've been trying to get on, and I've missed the conversation, so I don't know if I can.
This is the part where you jump in and tell us what you would have said, because we the whole first part of this call is always us laying a groundwork, and you telling us what you would do about it. So please.
Well, let me just kind of outline the problems as I see them, just from my own experience. And what you said was very interesting, Tiffany, about when was the last time we actually cured a disease. And, when I was a kid, that's what America did. We were curing all the diseases. And now we don't do them anymore. Now we have a pill for every disease, and we don't even pretend to be curing them. It's about creating the pill, which is a way to monetize disease. And a lot of people talked about, I don't want to use the word conspiracy because anytime I use that word, I get in trouble. But this entanglement, this very, very insidious, corrupt entanglement between the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the government agencies that connect the whole thing. You had the USDA, which was supposed to stand up for family farmers and healthy food, and is now all about commodities and industrial agriculture and chemical agriculture and petrochemical fertilizers. And then you have health agencies who are completely captured by the pharmaceutical industries. The only thing they care about is the mercantile ambitions of those of the pharmaceutical cartel. And it's agency capture on steroids, because FDA gets half its budget from pharma. If I sued EPA for many years. EPA is captured by the coal and oil industry and the chemical industry, really captured. But what would it look like if 50% of EPA's budget was coming from coal companies? It would be like, they wouldn't even have any pretense that they're an environmental agency, and that's what FDA is. Anything healthy, whether it's stem cells or raw milk or colloidal silver or anything that actually is good for you, or curcumin, for example, they're going to try to ban it, because it's not making money for the pharmaceutical companies, and they're just out in the open about that. And then and NIH actually makes money on the drug. I think in 2016, there were 220 new drugs approved by FDA, and all of them came out of NIH labs. That means NIH, we passed a bill in 1980 called the Bayh-Dole Act. And that act gave EPA or NIH the right to collect royalties on any product it develops. And any scientist who works for NIH has margin rights for the patents. These are the people, the regulators, who are supposed to be finding problems with those products. But they're making $150,000 a year forever on these products, and they're paying for their mortgages, their kids' education, their boats. Their alimony is coming out of the drugs that they're supposed to be regulating and protecting us from. So they've all got blinders on. There's a very, very perverse incentives. And then you have the food stamp program, which just is, acting like a bellows, pumping poison food into particularly to poor people in our country who are already living in food deserts, and amplifying this huge health crisis, of diabetes and obesity, and with addictive foods designed to be addictive, designed by former tobacco scientists. And I remember in White Plains, New York, I had an assistant who had worked for Kraft, which was a food company, and Kraft sold itself to Philip Morris, and she left because Philip Morris came in and put ashtrays on every desk and encouraged people to smoke indoors. And, the whole culture of Kraft became the culture of big tobacco. Is how do we make food addictive? How do we, and so and she left. She came to work for me.
Uh-oh, Big Tobacco's in the chat. Big Tobacco's up in the chat. Knocking Bobby out. Bobby said the wrong thing. Crap.
I'm bringing him back in. I don't know what just happened, but I'm bringing him back. It's all right. We're all better. We've got him back in here. We can probably find at least 3 ways to spin that, and it was definitely Big Tobacco.
Hey, guys.
It's all right. We fixed it. All better.
Can you see me?
We can't see you yet, but we can hear you just fine. I just sent a camera request for you. There you are. All right.
Anyway, so, and this happened throughout the food industry. It was infiltrated by the tobacco blueprint. And these are no longer foods. They're just poison. We went to commodities on the farm instead of food, and there's very, very little nutrition in them. And then the processed food companies add all these poisons to make them addictive. We have 1,000 ingredients in our food that are banned in Europe, and we wonder why we have the sickest kids in the world and the sickest population. Why during COVID we had 16% of the COVID deaths in this country. We only have 4.2% of the global population. So whatever we were doing was wrong. People are getting awards for it. No, they should be getting punished for it, because whatever we were doing was wrong. CDC says, well, it's not our fault. It's not our fault. We didn't blow COVID. It's because Americans are so sick. According to CDC, the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So they had obesity, they had diabetes, they had asthma, and one other thing. And we have the highest chronic disease burden of any country in the world. And that is one of the reasons we had the highest mortality rate from COVID, the biggest body count of anybody. When my uncle was president in the early 1960s, the chronic disease rate in our country was 6%. Today, it's 60%. And those by chronic disease, I mean essentially a couple of categories. One is obesity, which is its own category. The other is neurological disorders, ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, autism. These are diseases. I have 11 siblings. I have 70 first cousins. I never heard of any of these diseases when I was a kid. Nobody had them. And by the way, I was raised on the spear tip of the movement for rights for people with intellectual disabilities. My aunt Eunice Shriver, who lived a few minutes from my house, started Special Olympics in her backyard. It was called Camp Shriver. And I was working there since I was 8 years old as a hugger and a coach. I worked for 200 hours in high school for Mosaic Home for the Retarded. And this was part of my family DNA. My cousin, Anthony Shriver, who's running the state of Florida for my campaign, started Best Buddies. So my family has devoted itself to this issue. And I was around people with intellectual disabilities my entire life. I never saw anybody with full-blown autism. To this day, I've never met anybody my age with full-blown autism. And by that, I mean nonverbal, non-toilet tram, head banging, toe walking, stimming, hand flapping. I've never seen anybody like that my age. According to the CDC, 1 in 10,000 people my age, 70-year-old men, has full-blown autism. And my children's generation is 1 in every 34, 1 in every 22 boys. So EPA said, Congress said to EPA, tell us what year the autism epidemic began. And EPA is a captive agency, but it's captive by oil, coal, and chemical, not by pharma. So they came back with an actual real study, and that study said 1989, that is the change year, a dramatic red line change year. Something happened in 1989. And it's not just autism that began that year. All of these other categories, autoimmune diseases, suddenly appeared. Rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile diabetes. When I was a kid, a typical pediatrician would see 1 case of diabetes in his lifetime. 40 or 50-year career, 1 case. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And we're paying more for mitochondrial dysfunction, which is diabetes, than we're paying for our military budget. And nobody's asking, why is this happening? Rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, all these, lupus, all these exotic diseases that suddenly appeared around 1989 that we never saw before. The allergic diseases, peanut allergies, food allergies. I never knew anybody. I had all these cousins and siblings. I never knew anybody with a peanut allergy. Never heard of it. Why do 5 of my 7 kids have food allergies? Somebody needs to answer this question. And clearly, it's not genetic. Genes don't cause epidemics. You need an environmental toxin. And the genes may provide a vulnerability, but they're not going to cause it. You need an exposure. And, there's a very famous scientist, a toxicologist in New York, named Phil Landrigan, that I've used in many, many of my cases. He's one of the most important toxicologists in the world. He's been a witness in some of the biggest cases on lead poisoning, lead in paint, all this stuff. He took a look at this and he said, okay, something happened in the early 90s and it affected every demographic from Cubans in Key Biscayne to Inuit in Alaska. And it has a couple of other characteristics. One is the neurological injuries tend to affect boys at a 5-to-1 rate to girls. But some of the autoimmune diseases are disproportionately impacting girls. But there's a number of different signals that you can look for. And he said, okay, it's got to be a toxin, and it became ubiquitous during that period. What are the potential culprits? And he comes down with about 13. One of them is glyphosate, which is in Roundup, which fits the timeline pretty perfectly. Neonicotinoid pesticides, atrazine, which is now in 63% of our drinking water. Forever chemicals, PFOAs, PFASs, these are flame retardants that were put in all of our furniture and our children's pajamas, and they're in our water supply from firefighting foam on the airports, etc. And they are, and that is one of the big culprits. It's an endocrine disruptor. It's carcinogen. It's got all of these. It's neurotoxic. It's hematoxic. It's teratogenic. It's mutagenic, and it never leaves your body. And then high fructose corn syrup, another one, and Wi-Fi radiation from cell phones. And it's probably, Wi-Fi radiation, we know, disrupts the blood-brain barrier. So it probably works synergistically with these other exposures to allow these toxic assaults on our brain and our other organs. But it's probably not any one of these. It's probably all of them combined. Many of them are working on the same biological pathways. And one that I didn't mention is the vaccine schedule, which has to be looked upon as a culprit. All of those diseases that I mentioned, the autoimmune, the neurologically allergic diseases, every one of them are listed as potential side effects among the 420 side effects that are listed on the manufacturer's inserts of the 72 vaccines that we now are mandated for our kids. So I had 3 vaccines when I was a kid. My children had 72. We're going up now to 79 with the COVID and flu vaccines. And the big change here was 1989. Why is that? Because in 1986, Congress passed the Vaccine Act, and Reagan signed it, which gave immunity from liability to the vaccine companies. And that triggered a gold rush, because I only had 3 vaccines when I was a kid. My kids had all these other ones, but the gold rush happened beginning in 1989 when the industry realized, hey, now we got a product. The biggest cost for every other medicine is downstream liability. Now we got a product where we can never be sued. We can never be liable for downstream liability. It's like a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. They also had a couple of other advantages. One, vaccines are the only medical product that is exempt from pre-licensing safety studies. Why is that? Because the vaccine program was initially launched by the Public Health Service, which is one of the 5 uniform military services. And it was launched as a national security defense against biological attacks on our country. So they wanted to make sure that if the Russians attacked our country with anthrax or some other biological agent, we could quickly formulate a vaccine and then deploy it to 280 million Americans with no regulatory impediments. And they said, if we call it a medicine, we're going to have to do 5-year safety studies with placebo controls. But if we call it something else, we'll call it a biologic, and then we will exempt biologics from safety testing. So not one of the 72 vaccines now mandated for our kids has ever been tested in a pre-licensing placebo-controlled trial. So that saves them about $200 million. And then they got another big advantage, which is they don't have to do any advertising or marketing for this product, because the federal government is going to order 76 million kids to take it. So, and also another advantage is that NIH develops it for them for free. So you have the perfect product. You can't be sued. The government is making people, is creating a forced coerced market. There's no testing cost, and the government does your development cost. So of course there was a gold rush, and if you can get it on the schedule mandated, it usually means about $1 billion a year to your company. In some cases, much more than that. So they all rushed to put the new ones on the schedule. They put a lot of stuff on the schedule that's not even for casually infectious diseases like hepatitis B, many others. And that is another potential culprit. As I said, you probably can't point at one culprit. I know you can't, and say that's doing all the damage. It's all of these different exposures that create a constant assault on our immune systems, and the mitochondria finally just give up. And that, the energy centers of our cells just finally say uncle, and that's when the damage starts happening. When the mitochondria stop functioning. So I didn't intend to talk about any of this stuff. I was going to talk about industrial agriculture, but why don't we get to questions?
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a quick one because I actually have already heard your answer on this question, but I know we weren't going to talk about this. We actually didn't have any question submissions in advance about vaccines. I've seen you on Bill Maher. A lot of people like to say that you're this person that is extraordinarily anti-vax, but I've heard you say I'm vaccinated. My kids are vaccinated. What do you actually think about vaccines? What do you think they should?
I've never been anti-vax. If there's ever a vaccine where there's good science that shows it does what it's supposed to do, which is you get the vaccine and you're immune from the target disease and you're more healthy 5 years and more likely to be alive in 5 or 7 years from now than if you didn't get it, then I would line up and take it. I want to see those studies first, and I think most people should be able to see them first. The problem is most of those studies aren't done, and what I'm saying is let's get them done so we can have informed consent, so the physicians can know what the costs and benefits are, whether a certain product is averting more costs than it's that you want to make sure that product is going to avert more costs than it's going to cause, more injuries going to cause. We don't have good data on that, and what I would say is every medicine has side effects. And, I've always said there is no vaccine that's safe and effective for everyone. Somebody's going to get injured, just like with every other medicine. And the medical cartel, their response to that is we can't talk about it. We have to pretend that never happens. We have to gaslight those people. We have to marginalize. We have to vilify them. We have to silence them. And the press, which is really just a state functionary now, the propagandists like we saw during COVID, will never report on vaccine injuries. And, so if you ask them, why aren't you reporting? They say, well, they're so rare and we don't want to make people upset. They may be rare. Some people say they aren't. There's data that suggests they aren't, but they may be rare. But even if they're rare, if a kid gets a rare cancer, we acknowledge it, we take care of them. And what I say is let's take care of the people who got injured, and it may be rare, but let's take care of them. Let's study them to make the product safer. And the problem is that with vaccines, because they're immune from liability, there is no incentive for the company to make them safer. And so it's real, and because they're mandated and you're giving these to healthy people, this is the only medicine you give to healthy people. When you give it to
is it fair for me to say that you're not anti-vax, you're pro-vaccine safety?
Exactly, and pro-good science.
There were 3 comments that said that. I wanted to read them out loud because 3 commenters said, it doesn't sound like he's anti-vax, it sounds like he's pro-vaccine safety.
Exactly. Well, thank you for finding a shorter answer for me.
Can I just add for people in the chat who are asking about the reports too, sorry to interrupt, but VAERS, I feel doesn't get enough notification. The Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, it is there that if people want to dig in.
Lindsay, you are my first question, so I'm coming to you, dear. Lindsay, you have met, I believe you called him Mr. Bobby Sir last time.
I did.
And Lindsay has the leadoff question that makes the most sense. So we're going to go to Lindsay first. Lindsay, what have you got?
So for me, I feel I wasn't even going to bring this up, but I do have 2 autistic boys. And I got diagnosed autistic myself at 37. So I guess my question is, why is there, so many sick kids in the world right now? And I also have a chronically ill child. And how does that correlate to the food? And what can you do to improve that and change that and bring light and awareness in a positive way?
Yeah, I'm sure, as you know, as a mother of kids with autism, that there are protocols now which, for treating autism, and almost all of those protocols include dietary restrictions, and mainly it's I'm not an expert on this, but I think most of them are to avoid gluten, um, and to avoid, there's a number of other, avoid sugars and avoid a number of other um, uh, foods, and those are the kind of foods that have toxins in them, that have processed foods that have preservatives and all these other. And if you're asking me why, has autism exploded? Clearly, it's because there's toxic exposures, and I think some of those come from the vaccines, some of them are coming from the food supply, from our water. But our kids are
coming from our food supply and our water. How is that legal at all? And what can you do to change that and to make it better if you get in office?
Well, here's the thing, is that a lot of people say you can't change it because he's come to, let's say, for example, that we found like very clear scientific evidence that high fructose corn syrup was a major causative factor in the diabetes epidemic in our children and in the epidemic of obesity. A lot of people would say, well, even if you knew that for a fact and everybody knew it, you could show it. It's like the tobacco industry. They're 10 times more powerful than the tobacco industry. Cargill and Monsanto control every chair of the agricultural committee in both houses. They control the USDA. You'll never be able to You'll never be able to deregulate it. They pay off Congress. They own Congress. This is all true. But I have a different plan, and it's this, and this will actually work. I'm going to go to NIH my first week, and I'm going to call all the division heads, and I'm going to call all the bureau chiefs, and I'm going to say, we're going to give drug development and infectious disease a break, a little bit of a break for about 8 years. And we're going to study chronic disease, and we're going to find out what's causing it, and we're going to do lots and lots of science on it. So if you have just one study that shows that high fructose corn syrup is causing the diabetes epidemic, that's not going to change the world. But if you have 15 studies, and it's a good mix of bench studies, animal studies, observational studies, epidemiological studies, clinical studies, and you have a lot of them, then what happens? The attorneys come in and sue the high fructose corn syrup makers, and then it's game over. This is what we did with Monsanto. Everybody told me that you'll never get rid of glyphosate in home gardening products. And we went ahead and sued, and we got 40,000 home gardeners, almost all of them are home gardeners, who had been exposed to glyphosate and gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And we had about 15 studies that show that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, that glyphosate causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. There's a standard in the federal courts called the Daubert standard. And that standard says that you can't go to a jury with a case about a chemical exposure and causation till you have a sufficient number of studies to make that mainstream science. And no, there's no official count of how many studies that is. It's kind of it's a threshold that is a little bit objective, but you know when you've gone past it. And we felt we had gone past it, that we had enough under Daubert to get by Daubert in the Monsanto case. We went to a Daubert hearing. The judge has to make this determination himself. He cannot allow you to talk to the jury until he's made that threshold determination. In Monsanto, the 3 different judges all made the same Daubert finding that we had sufficient science to take this case to a jury, and then it's over for the company. So we had by mid-trial, we had 40,000 people, 40,000 home gardeners. My firm had about 1,800 of those. We were one of the 4 or 5 law firms that were bringing the case and paid for it. And the first case, we represented an African-American school superintendent who had been, part of his job was spraying the weeds on the school property, and he used a backpack full of glyphosate. It leaked. He got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma all over, pustulating lesions all over his body. He had only about 2 months to live. We tried his case. The jury gave us $289 million. He's still alive today because he was able to get treatment with that money. The second case, we won $89 million. The third case, we asked for $1 billion. And it was a couple who had both been avid gardeners. They went out every day, sprayed glyphosate because they were told it was completely safe. They wouldn't use any other pesticide. And went out with their Labrador Retriever. The Labrador Retriever got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and died the same time that they were diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And, we went with this incredible story to the jury. We asked the jury for $1 billion, and they came back with $2.2 billion. And at that point, Monsanto said, we're done. We want to negotiate. And then we negotiated a settlement, $13 billion.
Wow.
And Monsanto promised in that settlement to remove glyphosate from home gardening products. So you can beat them, but you have to do it with science. And that, that means you got to get control of the agency, you got to change the culture, and you got to say, we are not funding drug development for a little while. We're just going to study why are our kids the sickest kids in the world.
I think that was a fantastic answer. Thank you so much, Bobby. Thank you.
I'm going to springboard off of that. I'm going to come down to Matthew from My Health Forward. Bobby, you haven't gotten to meet Matthew, but he is an amazing researcher that has created a website that helps Americans find healthy farming, teaches regenerative farming techniques, connects people with historic seeds, and he has created a database where people can find farmers all across the U.S. to buy straight from farms. He's a spectacular researcher. Matthew, I'm going to come to your question number 2. Is that okay?
Yes, yeah.
Perfect. I'd love to go to question 2. Thanks.
Yeah, so first off, it's a pleasure to speak to you, Bobby. I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity. So what I was interested to hear about is, because you just talked a little bit about your long-term plan to get a lot of those synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides out of our food supply, and also disrupt, the agrochemical oligopoly that controls the seed supply. But I've heard you talk a lot about regenerative agriculture. A lot of the farms I work with are utilizing these practices. And I listened to your regenerative roundtable you did last year. We have a common acquaintance, White Oak Pastures, and you also spoke to Ben Dobson, who had some great quotes. And I'm just interested to hear how exactly, since, Will Harris says regenerative agriculture cannot scale, but it can spread. How exactly do you plan, you and your administration, to spread regenerative agricultural practices, incentivize it, and help farmers make the transition from conventional to, more biodynamic and holistic approaches?
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly what I'm going to do. I can tell you that I'm going to, I've spent a lot of time suing USDA, and I understand how entrenched that industry is with corporate agriculture, with industrial agriculture, with chemical agriculture, and they're committed to it. They've also created this very perverse industry, which is GMO corn, that has tentacles everywhere, and it's built. It has built-in constituencies that are very, very powerful. Not only Monsanto and Cargill and Smithfield and all of the industrial meat producers, because those industrial meat producers, they require surplus corn. That's part of their business model. They need that cheap surplus subsidized corn. They can't raise those animals out on the farm, which is what they used to do. A typical, in the old days, a hog farmer would have a half a section, like 360 acres. He would raise corn. He would have maybe 30 or 40 sows. He would feed this corn to the sows. He would take their manure and fertilize the fields. It was a rough loop, closed cycle kind of. And that was his business model. Today, they don't grow anything on the farm. They dispose of waste. The farm fields and these industrial agricultural outfits are just waste absorption fields where they dump their, the excess manure, and nothing grows out there but Bermuda grass. And if the cows escape and get in that Bermuda grass and eat it, they're going to die. So they completely rely on this subsidized corn, and then the whole methane industry is relying on this subsidized corn, and the high fructose corn syrup industry, and so you've got all of these very, very powerful industries that are controlling USDA, and they're all in cahoots on this criminal enterprise. And the challenge for me as president is, how do I correct that corporate culture? And how do I break up this cartel without, destroying the lives and the economy of all the people who've been sucked into depending on it? And it's going to be tricky. It's not going to be easy, but you need somebody to do it who goes in there with complete determination. And I know what my vision is, which is to switch this country to regenerative agriculture. Any subsidies to the my objective is to reduce subsidies for GMO corn and switch those subsidies as much as I can to individuals to incentivize them to switch to regenerative agriculture. It's a national security issue. It's important for our democracy. Thomas Jefferson said American democracy will only survive if it's rooted in tens of thousands of independent freeholds owned by family farmers, each with a stake in our system of government and our economy. And that's not what we got today. What we got is giant companies. Smithfield controls about 40% of hog production in this country, and some of these states like North Carolina and Iowa, it may control a significant part of the land base, and it sold itself a couple of years ago to China. So this is a colonial model where, Chinese company owns the landscapes, they own our food production, and that's not good for us economically. It's not good for our democracy, and it's terrible for our national security. And so these are national security issues, and I'm going to use that card to leverage a switch in subsidies to something that actually is going to give us national security, which is long-term vibrancy and productivity of American soils, which are now depleting at a rate that is threatening the livelihood and the security of our nation.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I really like the one thing you said about how so many farmers have been sucked into this system. And while you have a vision for how you want to transition a lot of the farming practices, you recognize that it can't just be something drastic, because then that would put people out of their jobs. And we're already seeing, if we look at the USDA data, farmers only receive around 15 cents for every dollar spent on food. Since 2017, we've seen a 7% decline in farms. And every day we're seeing more generational farms close for good. And a lot of what I work on is localizing food systems. So I have two questions for you that are follow-up. The first is, how would you as president just encourage everyday Americans to support local farmers? And then the other part of that is, because you talked a little bit about the meat packing, there's an oligopoly on meat packing. 85% of it is controlled by 4 companies, 2 of which are Brazilian owned. And ranchers currently, they have to get their livestock slaughtered at these USDA inspected facilities. And oftentimes there's not much local regional access because of the big 4. And so a lot of the farmers I work with, they have to, travel hours to get their livestock slaughtered. They don't have control over the ingredients put in or the processing. So the other question I want to ask is, how would you support small American ranchers and localized meat packing? I know you've talked before about the Prime Act, but interested to hear your thoughts about both of these. So, helping Americans support local farmers, and on the flip side, helping local farmers have access to those packing and processing facilities.
Well, I'm going to use every tool at my disposal in order to help local farmers, including meeting with them and listening to their ideas. That is where you get your best ideas, because these guys have thought about it. They're smart as hell, and they can tell you how to change things, structural changes that will incentivize, a gradual switch to agriculture, but also to use the bully pulpit as president to take Cheryl like we do on weekends. We go to the farmers market here, and but I'm going to go with the entire White House press corps, and and celebrate that, and celebrate small farmers, and constantly be telling the public that watch the food you eat, make sure it comes from a local farmer, If it comes from a processed food company, if you're eating something in a package, it's not food, it's poison. So, and the President of the United States is going to be saying those words constantly. And that's really, I think, important. And then in terms of the meat packers, I got a million ideas about how to break up the meat packers. That's something I can actually do because it's illegal what they're doing. There's only 4 of them. It's a monopoly. It's an antitrust violation. I'm going to set the Department of Justice loose on them. And I'm going to I never promise things that have to go through Congress. This Congress is such a mess, but I'm going to immediately put a bill into Congress that says that local meat packers can go to slaughterhouses that are state approved for meat that's going to be sold in their state. So, that the federal government.
Oh gosh. Oh no. I'll fix it. It's okay, guys. While he was talking about that for food processors that are available in their states, and there he is, he's back again. Hold on. Bringing him up. For anybody up in Michigan, Marendorf Meats. I go up there twice a year with giant coolers and have them process meat for me. Marendorf Meats. They are amazing, and they have the best grocer. Ask them to put your phone in do not disturb mode, please, Bobby.
How do I do it? Oh, I don't know.
Pull the phone down and just tell them to put it in, pull down on the right side of your iPhone and push do not disturb on focus. It'll help. All right. So for our next question, I'm going to come over to Farm Fresh. I know he was just finishing up yours, Matthew, and I know you have 2 more, Matthew. I'll try to circle back to your other ones. Please go ahead and finish your last thought there, Bobby.
Well, I was just going to tell you something that, I sued Smithfield Foods many, many years ago. Smithfield had built a slaughterhouse in North Carolina that could slaughter 30,000 head a day. And they then went into business with this guy called Wendell Murphy. Wendell Murphy was a state legislature. And Wendell Murphy looked at what had happened to the chicken industry, where you had 3 guys, Frank Perdue, Bo Pilgrim, and John Tyson, who had devised a new way of raising chickens in warehouses and stuffing a million birds into these little battery cages where the bird can't even stand up or turn around, and then dose them with subtherapeutic antibiotics and hormones that caused them to lay their guts out over a short and miserable life. And they had effectively, in just a few short years, they put 1.4 million independent American chicken farmers out of business, and they made themselves billionaires. And Frank Perdue in the late 80s or early 80s looked at this system and he said, I'm going to do that to pork. He was in the state legislature running the agricultural committee. He put through 27 bills that to make it illegal to sue any operation that calls itself a hog farm. And after he wrote all those bills, he left and he invented a warehouse that's called, my original one was called a Murphy 1100. You put 1,100 sows in there. And he started raising, he signed contracts with Smithfield. And they went into a partnership. And they dropped up, using this method, they dropped the price of pork from 60 cents a pound to 2 cents a pound over a 2-year period. And it cost the farmer 32 cents a pound to raise that hog to kill weight. So he put out of business literally every independent hog farmer in the state. There were 28,000 independent hog farmers in North Carolina, and within 5 years, there were only 2,200 left. And the only ones that survived were ones that were wholly owned by Smithfield or Murphy Farms, which later merged, or signed contracts with them. And the contracts required them to build a hog shed, a Murphy 1100, which cost around that time around $120,000. So the farmer would have to mortgage his house, build that Murphy 1100 hog shed. And then the grain was owned by Smithfield. The hogs were owned by Smithfield. They delivered on the babies. And then they'd tell him what to do. And they raised him to kill weight and gave him back. And it was only a 5-year contract, but it was going to take him 20 years to pay off that hog shed. After 5 years, Smithfield would come back and renegotiate the contract. And if it wanted to put him off the land, it would do that. And in that way, they got control of all these landscapes. They did it by controlling slaughter capacity. So then they went to Europe to do the same thing over there. And they went to Poland. And they bought up all the old communist slaughterhouses. There were, at that time in Poland, there were about 5,000 private abattoirs. Every little village had an abattoir, and many of the farms where they would slaughter, and they had the best pork in the world. They made these kielbasa sausages that were famous all over Europe. All the farms in Poland were organic, all of them. Because during the communist era, they had no money for pesticides. It was high quality meat. Smithfield came in there. They took over the huge communist slaughterhouses. Then they made a rule. They bribed a guy called Andre Lepper. They offered him $1 million bribe to pass a law that says that anybody who's slaughtering animals has to have laser triggered faucets in their bathrooms.
What?
As a sanitary measure, because then you don't have to touch the faucet with your hand. You just wave your hand under it, and you wash your hands. That was hygiene, but it cost $20,000 or $30,000 to put that thing in your house, and nobody could afford it.
All the little farmers couldn't do
They
it.
shut down all the abattoirs in Poland overnight.
Disgusting.
And so I see, I debated to have Smithfield in front of the Polish parliament. They brought criminal charges against me, and I couldn't go back to Poland for 10 years. But that's a whole nother story.
That's
but
legendary for what it's worth. We appreciate your sacrifice, sir.
I saw firsthand the power of that slaughter capacity to turn every farmer from a independent family farmer into a serf, into an indentured servant on his own property. And that is why we cannot allow to have slaughter capacity controlled by 4 companies. It's crazy.
Perfectly said. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you so much. All right, so I have a few questions we're going to pivot to because I have kind of a thread I'm going to try to weave here. First, we're going to come over to Farm Fresh, then we're going to come to Sevenkin, and then we're going to head down to Tara Lynn at Wicked Witch. Farm Fresh, you're up.
Okay, cool. So I want to speak to a wealth of information you just presented. Culture is one thing that I teased out. And we're going solution-based. We kind of got the problems already up to our neck. Solution-based, I believe that as Americans, regular old Americans who started reverting to growing food again, baking bread, preserving food, creating their own medicines out of natural elements that are right outside their yard. The solution for us is hyperlocal food systems. And we kind of are piggybacking off of your true free market economy. And we created an app, Farm Fresh 24/7, that's available for download, that we can, kind of barter or sell and buy from each other. That was our first implement that we wanted to do, was just provide solutions for each other and then offer our community with fresher, nutrient dense, ethically sourced products. As far as your policies, how do you intend to support this budding community, this budding culture of hyperlocal food systems as it pertains to just receiving healthier options?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you exactly what I'm going to do other than what I already said, which is to use the bully pulpit to encourage this. This is the immediate center point of my wheelhouse, which is how do you democratize our country? How do you turn back local control? How do you create communities? How do you, get our kids off the social media and the cell phones and actually get them to start dealing with other human beings and taking responsibility and sovereignty in their community. And, there's no better way to do that than making food the centerpiece of democracy. And that's what Thomas Jefferson did. That's my vision for this country. We got to heal the country in every way. And it starts with healing the soils, if we have healthy soils in this country, we've solved every problem that we have. We solve the national debt. We solve climate crisis. We solve the opioid crisis. We solve everything is about healthy soils. And you guys who are working on this know exactly what I'm talking about. Those words will sound insane to somebody who's, subsumed in the industrialized paradigm. But anybody who actually is living this and you're seeing all these connections every day, this is how we save America. We start by saving the soil, and that's through hyper-localized agriculture. That's where it's going to happen, and that's going to rebuild our communities. It's going to connect people to each other. So this epidemic that we have of alienation, of marginalization, of atomization and fragmentation, that's all amplified by social media. The remedy for that is soil.
I know I'm coming straight to 7kin, but a transition statement. Vitamin K 2.0 in the comments just said, how do you feel about being at the center of Americans finally waking up to what's happening all around us, about why we're so sick, about why we need to find better food, about why we need to grow better food? And do you feel like you're a part of that? Do you feel like people are waking up more?
Well, that's been probably the most exciting part about this campaign, is discovering this, entire movement that's going on right now where, I'm looking at all these faces there. Everybody is so different. You're all from different parts of the country. You're all from different races, colors, religions. And, I interviewed on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, John Boyd, who's head of the National Black Farmers Association. And then 2 days later, I'm with John Kemp, who's an Amish farmer, from Ohio. And all of them are using the same language. They understand all these connections to democracy, to good health, to good mental health, to the national debt, to climate. All of these connections that that everybody understands, and it really is, to me, it's been the most hopeful part of this campaign, and I love it. I love this group that we put together here, that Tiffany, you put together here tonight. So many people I admire here. Mark Hyman, who's one of my best friends and who's like a guru on this stuff, who's been preaching it forever. And, it's just great that we're all together now, and that we all, we're all talking the same language and educating each other and learning from each other. And, it's about a revolution against the technological and industrial control that is subverting our democracy and subverting all the values that this country stood for. And it's a new American revolution. It's about restoring democracy, restoring integrity, restoring our value, and elevating humanity above the technocracy. I love
it. For what it's worth, that's what brought me to you too. So that's what brought a lot of us to your content, right? I'm going to transition to Jason at 7kin Homestead, who has an amazing homestead account that really shows people how to do more with less, how to grow, how to access and eat healthy with less resources. I'm a kid that grew up in a foster household, and I did not have access to healthy food. I'm somebody that, and I never talk about this online, because I grew up so food insecure, because I grew up so hungry, I hoard food. I have 4 freezers of butchered food from farms around my house because I'm always afraid I'm not going to have the food to feed my kids. I'm lucky I live in a farm area, but I hoard food. I don't hoard anything else, but I hoard food because I grew up so insecure, and I always want to make sure we have healthy food options. We're an ingredient household. That really kind of is what Jason's question is about. So Jason, can you come and talk a little bit about access and what you're hoping to understand about what could change with an RFK presidency?
Sure. First of all, I'd like to just tell you thank you for coming on and talking to some regular folks about this. I would also like to point out an observation that I've made, which is the number of candidates in this particular election that can even pronounce half the words that you've pronounced in this talk is significantly less than 100%. So I can really appreciate that too. So, living the way that I do, I'm a homesteader. I live off grid. We generate our own power. We grow our food. We raise animals. We do all that stuff, but we still have to buy food as well. So we're not 100% food independent yet. But I do know a bunch of folks who run all different sized commercial farms, mostly family, anywhere between 100 and 500 acres usually. And some of them will have to take out millions of dollars in loans every year just for operating costs. And on a good year, if they're lucky, they'll make 50 grand. Okay. They're always trying to save money. They're always trying to save time because most of the farmers I know also have a full-time job on top of trying to feed their communities. And I think that's how farmers get roped into these contracts, which are wild, with the GMO companies, the Monsantos, and whatnot. They get promised safety and reliability from the seeds, chemical, and pharma companies, and then once they're in, they're in. I know of farmers who have been sued because they switched seeds, but they ended up having 2 or 3 areas of their pasture that had marked DNA seeds. The company will come in, test it, and they'll sue them for growing that there. So I think for me, there's a big problem managing the cost and the risk to the farmer to mass produce this good, healthy food versus the cost to the consumer. And there are healthy organic options, but as a father of 5 kids under 14 with twin 6-year-olds who eat like they're competing for a ribbon, feeding a family with a lot of those options is prohibitively expensive. And this may just be my experience, but it is something that I've experienced. Now, take all of that. You've got the risk to the farmer, the cost to the consumer, and it's been my experience that when government gets involved in these things, they take an already expensive necessity and they make it more expensive. And I guess what I want to know is what are the actual steps that can be taken to make it worth all the trouble and the risk for the farmer to eke out an existence, growing healthier, non-chemically laden food, and prevent governmental chicken bones and hobnobbery from running up the cost for both the farmer and the consumer, making the better food more affordable for people. Because that is a huge problem right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure what your question is. I mean, is the question how do we improve farm income, or the question is how to lower the price of food? I mean,
both maybe. I think what he's getting at is that some of the government regulations and some of
how do you do both?
Yeah, how can we make good food more affordable for families, and how can we make farming by small farmers not so prohibitive that only the big guys can survive?
yeah, I mean, I can't tell you exactly how to do that. I know it's a problem. By the way, I spent a lot of time representing not only family farmers against the big industrial farm companies, like Smithfield and Tyson and Purdue, but I also represented some of the contract farmers who had signed contracts with Smithfield and were, and then got run over. And I would ask them, how much do you make? Why are you living on that farm? Everybody today who's living on a farm almost entirely in this country is living on the farm because they want a farm and not because they want to make a killing. And when these guys would show me their family budgets and show me how many hours they worked a year and what their income was, and they were making $1.50 an hour or $2.50 an hour, something that you would go to jail to pay somebody that. So and part of that is that the price of food is artificially low in this country. I don't know how to fix that. It's low because industrial food is so heavily subsidized, and there's been a national policy to keep the price of food low. I would say there's a better way to do that. That we should have food subsidies or food stamps, but farmers have to make a living, and the price and the price of their produce has to pay them to actually stay on the farm. I never met any farmer who was living just off the farm. Most of them, their wives are going into town to work in the schools, or they have a second jobs. It's very, very rare to find anybody who's actually making money, actually farming or growing whatever, chickens, hogs. So I can't tell you. All I can tell you is I understand the problem. My ears are open. I would love to hear a solution that makes sense. A lot of the problems on farms, there are solutions out there, and there's brilliant people, like dismantling the Packer monopoly. We can easily do that. I can use the Sherman Antitrust Act. It should have been used a generation ago. And, it hasn't been, but I'm going to use it. But I don't know how I think it's a larger problem. The problem of how you increase farm income so that farmers are actually, making a living while they're farming their land. I can't tell you right now how to do that, although I'm open to any ideas and I'd like to hear them.
I know we're getting short of time and we do have a couple questions. Everybody's been real patient, so I'm going to try to get through them as quickly as I can. This happens to be an issue that I've gotten the privilege of knowing how you feel about this issue, but the world may not. I'm going to come to Tara Lynn, who has a question about some of the corporations that are taking control of our supply chains and even our pharmaceutical chains. Tara Lynn, go ahead. She's missing a Rolling Stones concert right now for this. So
we're sitting in the car, and it's well worth it. Bobby, nice to talk with you again. I've been in the healthcare industry for about 23 years, and during that time, I've witnessed several concerning trends. Two in particular. One is the increase of chronic conditions that are prevalent across America, and number two is the presence of private equity in every pocket of the delivery system, where we're seeing, when private equity is involved, that cost is skyrocketing and outcomes or care quality is declining. And especially those with a chronic condition who are going to be the highest utilizers in the system today. I would really like to know what you would do as president to curb private equity within, again, every pocket of our delivery system where we're not really seeing any sort of positive effect. Thank you.
Yeah, this is another issue that I'd love to hear your ideas. I'm very, very much aware of that problem. I see it all the time. A friend of mine has run the emergency room at a local hospital here for the past 34 years. The hospital was just taken over by BlackRock. And, their major issue now is closing out beds and making sure that there's 100% occupancy rate in the hospital, and that, and cutting all overhead, which means medical personnel and restricting how many minutes a doctor can talk to a patient. And the standard is 7 minutes. So that's how long the doctor has with each patient, because it is being dictated by Wall Street returns. I'll look at any tool I can for stopping that. One of the big issues that we're facing in this country now is the purchase of all of our residential homes by these big investment houses. BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard own 89% of the S&P 500. They're now trying to buy our agricultural land. They're trying to buy our residential housing and single-family homes, and it's driven the price of homes up. It's doubled in 2 years, and none of our kids are going to be able to get into homes because they're competing for the price of money against BlackRock, which has a bottomless bank book. They can't do it. And they're trying to turn us from a nation of owners to a nation of renters. And when that happens, we go from being citizens to being subjects. They're commoditizing everything. They're commoditizing our children, our landscapes, our public health, our hospitals, our communities. And I will look at every way I can to stop that. I have a plan for stopping them from buying housing. You know, we've already got a bill that I'm going to put into Congress in the first session after I get elected. That makes it illegal for investment houses to own more than a certain number of homes. I'd be interested in any kind of legislation or ideas for bringing lawsuits against them by the Attorney General, criminal lawsuits, or for injuring people. I don't know how to do it yet. I'm open to ideas. I am aligned with the objective, but I do not have the solution. I apologize.
You know, I know we've got a lot of people here. I do just want to recognize the mention that you made of legislation, because we are seeing in the regulatory environment that is having an effect on private equity, where they're not investing as much because the regulations are prohibitive in ways that they find troublesome. I think this next presidential election, this upcoming one, they're going to be looking very closely at what that president is going to do and whether or not they're going to continue that trend. So I very much would like to see more legislation, more regulation here that makes it harder for private equity to do what they're doing within our healthcare delivery system. Thank you so much.
For anyone out there that is watching this, I'm just going to say I met Bobby because I asked a question about private equity at a rally in Annapolis, Maryland. And he asked for my phone number. I thought he was trying not to answer the question. I really did. Next night, 9:45 p.m. doing dishes, he called me and said, I want to ask you, what can I do about private equity? And I went and we talked to each other. I thought I was going to listen to him talk. All he did was listen to me and say, tell me what I need to do about private equity. I really want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear about joint liability. I want to hear about expanding antitrust laws. I want to hear about joint and several. I want to hear, and he actually is surrounding himself and asking hard questions. He's not pretending he has all the answers. But I didn't think I was going to be listened to. And so just know that that's a thing he does. And that's how I met him. I am going to pivot a little bit. I'm going to come down to Dr. Mark, which he told me I could do that.
Tiffany, I got a bunch of people coming over here at 7:30 and it's 7:30. So I'm going to need to bail. I'm very sad because I really like this group and it's been a very, very fun meeting.
It's all right. We've got 100 more topics we'd love to talk to you on. So I know you've got a big thing tonight.
Yeah,
We will continue this conversation. I'm going to ask everybody in the comments before you go, Bobby, to stay for just a second. Everyone in the comments, you can click on the box Bobby is in and follow his account right now. You can click there and follow his account. You can keep up to date. He talks constantly on this app. He comes to this app to meet with you guys. And he absolutely like delivers on the information he says he's going to.
and I've asked a lot of the questions that I was going to ask Bobby on my podcast, The Doctor's Pharmacy. He's been on twice, so you might want to go listen to that.
We will go listen to that, Dr. Mark. Who's another, I mean, really, you should be following every account in these boxes. Purple USA didn't get back up here either. I'm going to bring her in a minute when Bobby leaves. But everybody, please go follow Team Kennedy. If you were lucky enough to be on here, you might already be following his private account. And we're going to thank you for coming. We are so grateful for the time and just putting actual American people ahead of the mainstream media and answering questions we have instead of questions we're told to have or care about. We truly appreciate it.
And Bobby, one idea to leave with based off of the previous question is produce prescription programs. I just want to mention one. FreshRx is a way to spread access to local food. FreshRx sources from regenerative farms in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then people get year-long prescription programs with their fresh, healthy produce. So she just testified in front of Congress in the last few weeks. Something to look into with your team.
Matthew, if you send it to me, I'll email it straight through. I'll get that to you, Bobby, I promise.
Thanks, Bobby.
All right, everybody.
See you later, Bobby.
Thank you so much.
Pass to move on with his night, and we're going to continue this conversation right here. I'm going to help him disconnect. We're going to bring some of our friends back up. Hold on, everybody. I'm bringing them back in. If I can find them down here. Purple, hold on. You fell down in my request. We've got like 400 requests. I'm doing my best. Let's see who we can get up here. All right, Purple USA, you're back in the box. Lindsay,
Hey,
I
I
find
should
you,
get my
please send me a
sponsors
request.
because I'm sick and my voice hurts anyways.
So everybody, I know we had a few technical issues on this one, but I thought we were going to talk about pharmaceuticals a lot more, but really we just talked about what we really need to be doing to be healthy, which is eating healthy food, growing healthy food, accessing healthy food, and helping people find healthy food, which Farm Fresh has a way to do, and Matthew has a way to do, and learning regenerative farming techniques that people in this box have a way to do. So if you have more questions down in the comments for people up here in the feed, we want you up here. We absolutely want you up here. Please give us the questions and we'll do our best to get them answered for you guys. So now comes the part of the conversation, guys, where we say, how'd you guys feel about that? What'd you guys get out of that? And did you learn anything new today?
Well, one thing straight off the bat, just to get the conversation going, is I've seen a lot of people comment this, that he said, I don't know, multiple times. I don't necessarily see that as an issue. I think it's good when people, politicians or just regular people admit when they don't know something. So I think the important thing, to follow up on is then, is he going to surround himself with the right people? Is he going to follow up on those conversations to get those ideas? So that was my immediate takeaway.
Might actually be the mark of a smart person that he is willing to admit what he needs information on. We should have high respect for that. Yeah.
It's one of the it's one of the most powerful sentences in the English language, actually, is I don't know. It's where all learning comes from. Yep.
Ian, I'm so sad we didn't get to your question. I'm so sorry, Ian.
Oh, you're all good, Tiffany. It is no problem. Bobby talks a lot, and that's what we're here for. He's great.
But
I've gotten to ask Bobby lots of questions.
I want everyone to know, like, Ian he's had the pleasure of being on a podcast with Nicole Shanahan, recording a podcast with Nicole Shanahan. When I recorded the podcast with Bobby, I truly did going to listen to him. I thought it was going to be like a campaign spiel, right? I assumed that's what I was walking into, was I would sprinkle in some stuff and then he would talk a whole bunch. It was the exact opposite. I feel like for every 20 minutes I spoke, he spoke maybe 2. I'm not kidding. We recorded for hours. And he just wanted to know, how is private equity doing this? What are you seeing on the inside? What are you hearing about the problems they're having? Where are they actually getting challenged in court? Like, the questions he asked me, these were not nonchalant or pacifying questions. He was like, what can we do? Where are these mini monopolies? What about joint liability? Can it even be established? Does it have to be done through legislation or through legal work? Could it be done through executive order? Like, I don't know about everything, but I know an awful lot about private equity, an awful lot. And be seeking out people that do, everyday people. He didn't know me from Adam. He read an article about me in the New York Times. He called me up after I'd asked him a question in a rally. That night, he said he left the rally, he went back to his trailer. I think he was on a bus at that point. I don't think it was a plane. And he said on his way to New York or wherever he was going, he read the article in the New York Times. And then he decided to call me the next day. Like,
imagine that, a presidential candidate showing initiative and interest in a private citizen. I love when you share your story, Tiffany, of how you got to know Bobby and his team. It really is, I think, very different and incredibly impressive, at least to me.
One of the things that I find the most fascinating.
I should go. I've got to fly all day tomorrow, and I'm like,
you're too sick. You need to go to bed, Ian.
So I'm gonna go to
Everybody,
sleep.
thank you, Ian, for being here. I'm so grateful you were here. Thanks, bud.
Drink some water.
Have a good night.
You're gonna be just fine.
Have a good one.
One of the interesting overlaps for me is anytime we're having a conversation about any of the industrial complexes. Today was about pharma, health, some food, whether we're talking about energy, military, every single thread comes back to this tie of money, to incentivization for them to do the wrong thing versus the thing for the people or the virtuous thing.
I'm live now.
I
requested to join, and she just.
Melissa, I'm going to mute you till you're ready, sweetheart. But you're still up here. I know you've been waiting a long time. Sorry about that, Tony.
No, it's all good. To hear every candidate kind of shrug their shoulders, I think for a lot of us, like older Gen Y or whatever, we've seen so much in our lifetime, from Clinton to 9/11, Halliburton stuff, Wall Street, United. It's just been one thing after another that I feel that this overlap is concerning to us, and to hear the politicians or potential candidates say that we're not really sure either reaffirms something for me that we ended up talking about, which is like it comes back down to that community level, which is what are we doing? What I was hoping to, it's like not don't ask what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. It's kind of part of his family legacy, and I think it's a top-down, top-up approach. And I would love to hear more from the candidates like we were tonight, but what can we do? Like what did they envision our participation from the ground up to look like to meet the top level stuff? Because most of us aren't going to be involved in the legislation, the lawsuits, like the regulation, the shaking up of three-letter agencies. Like that stuff is beyond most of us, and rightfully so. But to know that we can be actively meeting them in the middle in this quest to untangle ourselves from this mess is, I think that's one of the most important questions we could ask, to be honest.
Melissa and Jeff, I'm welcoming you guys up. I know you guys were I have over 300 requests to join, so I'm trying to see the ones that were there the first and who's been waiting the longest. How did you enjoy having Mr. Kennedy on, Melissa? What'd you learn? And did you have anything you wanted to ask the panel?
I thought it was really great. I actually, when I had talked to my husband originally about RFK, about Bobby, he was skeptical, and what was interesting is just letting him kind of overhear what he was talking about and all the answers that he had, that he just is very eloquent about, that he actually has in-depth knowledge of a lot of these things, and he shares what he knows, and he says, I don't know, like, with my health forward, I loved what you said. That to me, it says a lot when someone says, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn and listen. And for me, that's a really big deal. And my husband at the end of it was like, it wasn't even at the end, actually. It was very, just a few minutes in where he said, he's got my vote, because he's the only one that can speak intelligently about a lot of these subjects, and who's willing to say stuff about these big corporations and the people who are really running the show. And most people are not willing to speak ill of those, because then they won't donate to their campaigns. And that's why Bobby is not in the debates, and why he's not being seen on all of the media, who also is behind, they're owned by the same people as the corporations. So
I think that's probably how a lot of people, based on the comments, I hope a lot of people had those takeaways here in the comments today. We are big advocates here in my box. Generally, when people come up in the box, I firmly and fervently believe we have a duopoly. We have two parties that are run by the same billionaires. Right. They don't serve any of us. And at this point, I think the only place we can look to really change things is one another. And it's right here. It's going to happen right here in these conversations, and with the people willing to come and have these conversations. I think it's essential, and I think it's vital, and I think it's necessary.
I really appreciate you doing this, by the way. Thank you so much for all of you guys who came forward. I follow all of you guys, and I was just actually doing a video to record, here's my favorite resources and the people that I learned from on TikTok. So if there's anyone who has joined here and is not following, all of these creators are all wonderful, wonderful people. And I actually, Seven Kin Homestead, I was showing my husband a TikTok that you did the other day that was just very calmly explaining, like, this is what I think about this. What do you guys think? It's just my thoughts. And I think that's the way that we need to proceed, is helping each other and talking about the things that really matter, and in a way that says, this is thought-provoking, here's what I think, but your thoughts are valid, your opinions matter, and we can all learn from each other a little bit.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Oh my goodness. Okay, so Purple USA, you were in the comments quite a bit, Bree. How did you feel about it? I know you were really down there.
For somebody who is so angry at both parties, it's just really nice to see everybody coming from different places and just kind of understanding that the root of all of this is that we, the people, don't have enough power. So when you stop thinking about left versus right and you start thinking about up versus down, there's actually a lot of hope here. So you invited me unexpectedly to ask Jill Stein a question, and that was awesome. And then you did the same thing for RFK. And hearing candidates talk straight to us is the very best thing that I can think of that we can legitimately do in 2024, because we're probably not going to get like a win from the independent party. However, the amount of people we are reaching right now, the amount of citizens that we're pulling in, hope for the first time in my adult life. I feel hope for American politics. Yes. So yeah, I fully think he'd be a better candidate than either of the two big ones, but we have time for that.
Farm Fresh, Seven, Kin, and Matthew, it was your first time in the box with us. Farm Fresh, let's come to you first. How'd you feel about this? What do you feel like? Would you like to come back? Is this something that you think is a positive? How'd you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm agreeing with everybody. I think the most magnificent, profound thing that I heard this whole time was him being willing to lay down ego and just say, I don't know. I don't have the answers. And I think we need a movement such as this with a leader who is kind of headless and pulling from the audience and pulling from the constituents and pulling from just regular old people with ideas that have been proven and tested, and being willing to try to implement them speaks volumes. I loved every bit of it. I definitely wish he could have been here longer, but again, if he comes back, or any candidate, I think this whole run of the town hall meeting is wonderful, because again, we're getting to see our power as a collective manifesting in real life in these candidates who are fighting for attention are looking for our vote. They're looking for our eyes. They're looking for our shares. And in return, they're offering their platform or pedestal for our ideas to kind of, pop up and be brought to light. So I loved every minute of it. So I appreciate the offer to come and speak for a couple seconds.
Farm Fresh, you actually reminded me, there's a couple people in the comments that were wondering if RFK might possibly be coming back. Tiffany, do you have anything about that?
So I am very hopeful that he's coming back. I think tonight went really well. I know his campaign schedule is teeing up. However, we do have several different topics we've talked about with his team. It is certainly our hope that he comes back. We hope we can have more time with him on there are so many topics that the American people want answers on. And I've got to tell you, like everyone knows, we're about to watch a debate that is largely rigged. I don't like using the word rigged, but we know the deck is stacked. Not only are they not allowing an audience in the room, so you won't even hear real, they're going to overlay applause and stuff on it, and they're going to make it sound however they're going to make it sound. They're not allowing the audience in the room. They're not allowing real people to submit questions. They're not doing anything in a town. They're not doing a single town hall this entire election cycle where Americans get to suggest questions, because we don't even matter anymore. And they're saying it out loud. They're literally just saying it. Like, we don't care. It's fine. So the more that we're able to bring him here to this town hall and bring him to all of you, the more that people are going to be knowledgeable, ready, and prepared when the time comes to say, I saw him say this. So whatever you're hearing from the mainstream media, I saw him say this with my own two eyes. I heard that with my ears, right? And if they're not going to give him a platform, I absolutely intend to. I think all candidates deserve a platform. I believe that all candidates deserve to be heard. And I think it is absolutely vulgar what is happening with the debate. Vulgar. And so for me, I sure hope so. Yeah, I really hope so.
It almost sounds like you think Americans should have their own choices, Tiffany. It's crazy. Crazy.
Wild idea.
It's really important too. Like when we enter into these middle, like purple spaces, I noticed Melissa had said, like, we're talking about the things that really matter. And I think another way that we can say that, or like, these are the things that matter to most of us. And I think that's the place we start, because everybody's coming to the table with a different perspective, different socioeconomic status, gender, like we have all these things that matter to us and people like us. And those things are important, and we should never forget those. That's what makes us American. And we can fight about those until we're all ready to go into a nursing home. Fine. But at the end of the day, none of this starts to happen unless we celebrate and talk about the things that matter to most of us. That's how the ball even gets rolling in the right direction in the first place. So with these middle spaces, with independent candidates, if we're looking at them and they're willing to talk about those middle, mostly consensus issues, who else are we going to listen to? That's where I'm at in my life. It's like, I don't know if I want to listen to anybody else. I don't know if I want to talk
That's
about
how you build up agreement and momentum. That's how that rolling stone gathers moths, you know?
Yep, absolutely. All right, so Jason, how did you feel about tonight? Did you have any big takeaways?
Actually, I thought it was very fun, very interesting, and I was actually super impressed by Bobby. I'm a very undecided voter, and I'm extremely non-political by nature. I look at most politics like, right wing, left wing, same vulture, and this actually gave me like, there is actually like an egg that got left in the nest, something that's not part of that system. And that was very interesting to me. It kind of inspired me to look at things a little differently. I will tell you, being in this kind of an environment is way out of my wheelhouse, which is actually what I like. That's where I like to live, because that's where all the growth happens. So I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do that.
So grateful you responded to my message. I really am. I love your content. I have loved your content for a good long while. And so
thank you.
He probably gets a million messages a day. He's got an awful lot of followers. I don't know if he'll see this, but I'm gonna try.
No, as soon as I saw you, actually, because I saw your live coverage of the during the TikTok ban, and that's where I first started following you, actually. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's funny because of all the things that I got a lot of followers then, and I'm like, this isn't private equity, but I'll take it.
Right? I mean, it's the flip side of it, private equity trying to take over a platform that we all love, I'm
going to ask Matthew, it was your first time coming into one of our lives. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, so first off, thank you again, Tiffany. I thought you did really an amazing job. This is my first time watching or joining a live, but you really did a terrific job weaving together all the questions and making sure you touched on everything, and giving him the opportunity to follow up. So thanks again. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I didn't have a lot of expectations going into it, but it was just really nice to be able to talk back and forth and hear his thoughts and how he kind of weaved in his past experience. And I'm excited, going forward to maybe a big takeaway for me is be more specific in my questions to him, because I think it's easy to overestimate how much power a president has and how much they actually do versus the people they appoint. So maybe next time I might think of some ways to ask more specific questions about topics, and then also, if he doesn't know the answer, okay, then who might you appoint or who might you work with who then would know those answers?
I am really, really hopeful we're going to get him back here. I think tonight went really well, so hopefully that's going to be a big yes. And I'll, do a better job working with him on which account to join from next time. Maybe we got him 1,000 followers though, so it won't matter. We'll all be surprised together on that private account.
He made it out here though, and I'm confident he knows how to convert a PDF.
Yeah, no. I don't know any lawyers that don't, sir. I feel like what I loved most, I honestly thought tonight was going to be a lot more about big pharma. I thought we were going to end up there, but everyone here just gets it. Everyone got it, from Dr. Mark to everyone here gets it. We don't need what big pharma has to sell if we just never buy in. We can just choose a different path, right? We can choose a different path. Now, there's plenty of poison that's already there in the things that we have to eat. Do you guys want to hear something I learned yesterday? Do you know that you guys probably already know this. I did not know this. That Pringles can't legally be called chips. They're owned by Kellogg's. Everybody's boycotting them anyway. Did you know that? It's because they're not sliced potatoes.
I did know that. I
They're
actually did
like
that for one of my
made from
videos.
leftovers, potato droppings from making other stuff, mixed with like food starch and cellulose wood fibers.
I was today years old.
Into the shape of a chip. So they can't legally write that they are chips on their box. They're called crisps. And they can't put potato in
Crisps.
it. They're crisps. They can't even put potato crisps. They're not allowed because there's that little potato in it. Like that's what we're fighting against. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows that.
That's why they think that all of this is wasted vote stuff. Because if we stay stuck in the duopoly that we're in, that stuff never changes. And that's the stuff that's hurting us, our physical health, our communities, all of it. It's like more like, and so no matter what we can say about wasted votes or this candidate's worse than that one, Agenda 25, like whatever the thing, it's like, we're still going to be eating the same shit, though. Like everything stays the same other than these very specific topics that we're all very myopic about, and maybe rightfully so. But I think in the comments I saw it a ton tonight, wasted vote, and I just it baffles me because a vote for a third party is a vote taken away from both of the other candidates, not just one. That's basically
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that we get told all the time, the right is saying, oh, a vote for him is a vote for the other guy. The left is saying, oh, a vote for him is a vote for the other guy. Let me be abundantly clear. The only way that anything has ever changed with either party in this country is when votes went to anyone else. Okay? The only time that any party has changed or pivoted on any major issue of any consequence is when they were worried they lost votes in the last election as a result of not having that as part of their platform. And I'm going to say over and over again that for every 1% in votes that an independent increases, there is a 5% increase in the likelihood one of the two parties will adopt a popular part of their platform into their own so that they don't risk losing it again next time. We have never in American history had more registered independents than of either party until right now. And that is because we don't feel represented, because the only people being represented in Congress have the billions to pay the $13,600 a day that every member of Congress has to raise to get reelected. You know, we can change that too, though. We can change that. All we have to do is start elevating those voices right here. The guys that aren't taking that money. All we have to do is get them elected. And we also have to get people to actually show up and vote.
I think
5%.
we mentioned a cabinet position, which is like, you know, Health Forward mentioned, if you don't know the answer to the question, be honest anyway, because you're appointing cabinet. You're going to be building out the agencies that are responsible for a lot of this. I personally would like to see campaigns run with like the major heads of very like high level departments, right? So like we're seeing who you would lean on, and you can defer questions to that person. And I think James was the one who asked last time if the independent candidates would be willing to run as like basically the Avengers of the purple zone. And Jill seemed a little, you know, she wasn't huge on that, but I think it's a tremendous idea because at some point, those of us in this moderate space, we need to just get used to the fact that we might not like each other all the time. And that's okay. We can still do stuff and get things done top to bottom.
Yep. And again, we've said it how many times in this live, but we are not living in a left versus right world. They've done a very, very good job conditioning all of us to believe that. We are 1,000% living in a top versus bottom world right now. The problem is they've done such a good job propagandizing belief that that's what we're doing, that we forget that we have 93. That's our magic number. 93% of all of our values in common. Only the 7%, 3.5% on each side they use to divide us. We need to focus on that 93 and turn our attention towards DC.
And all of the hope comes back then. It like that's when you start to think like I'm 33. I had already felt completely hopeless about American politics. I absolutely hated Trump, but realized that Biden did not make the world better, you know? And I don't want to do a third election of just voting for the lesser of two evils. And I understand that that's going to be a choice that many of us are facing. I totally respect that. Vote your conscience. It's just that there's got to be a better way. I'm supposed to be alive for at least another 50 years. If I'm lucky, if I'm blessed, I can't do another half century this way. We're going to be in charge soon. So we have to start connecting. And so I started saying that, and then Tony found me, and then Tony found Tiffany. And I don't know about the rest of you that are live right now, but I have no idea how I got here, but I'm so glad I am. Yeah, it's awesome.
I always wrap at 11 p.m. I know we're coming up on pumpkin time. Lots of families need to see their kids. You've got work tomorrow. For everybody in America and abroad that has joined our live tonight, please follow the creators in these boxes. If you don't follow me, it's okay. Redheads that are this loud aren't for everybody, but please
You should though.
follow the creators in these boxes. Please.
Follow her too, for sure.
Thank you. They are changing the world. Literally, we will be back here with more town halls. We're moving to some vice presidential candidates, and we're going to have some town halls speaking to some members that are running for Congress coming up as well. We've got a lot of big stuff coming up. I am very hopeful we're going to have Mr. Kennedy back on, and we will have some follow-up lives later this week. I promise everybody, if anyone has any clothing, don't forget Farm Fresh has an app that will help connect you with resources for farms. And don't forget that My Health Forward has a full database of farms you can buy from in your communities. You guys should totally sync up, just saying. And then please don't forget that Ian from Cancel This Clothing has created a fully free and accessible database of all of the foods in your grocery store that are owned by mega corporations and all the foods that are owned by independent families. And you can go section by section and find what you can buy to support small businesses, founder-operated businesses, family-owned businesses in your grocery stores, in your communities. I go out and I cover which businesses you guys can support that are still founder-operated, which are still founder-run. So please come back. Stick around for everybody because tonight was an amazing night. There's still 900 people in the room. I hate to end something, but you always want to finish while you're on top, not while you're on the bottom. So we don't want to watch it dwindle. Everybody that was here, thank you so much.
That's the revolution, by the way, what she just said. My sign off. That's what it actually looks like. Bye.
Thank you guys so much.
Everybody have an amazing night.
See you later, guys. Thanks for having me.
I'll be in touch with all your clips so you can talk about this later. Everyone, take care of your neighbors, take care of each other. Remember, we're better when we're together. And you have more in common with the person you have least in common with on your block than you will ever have in common with a billionaire.
Heard that.
Ever. So go make friends with the people you don't think you'll agree with. Figure out why they are, where they are, and have conversations about what unites you. And we're all going to be better for it. Everyone have a wonderful evening and good night.